2022 City Council meeting. We continue to hold hybrid meetings to keep everyone healthy and safe. Our meetings are public, and you are welcome to join us in person by watching from the Council's agenda page, Facebook, YouTube, or SLC TV. We hope you'll continue to join us in whatever manner you feel most comfortable. This is a work session meeting during which there is no public comment. Please join us tonight during our 7 p.m. formal meeting to share your comments. We welcome your feedback anytime by mailing us at P.O. Box 145-476, Salt Lake City, Utah 84114, or email us at council.comments@slcgov.com, or on our 24-hour line 801-535-7654. Written comments we receive on agenda topics are shared with council members and posted to our website, slccouncil.com. And on this eve of the 11th day, or excuse me, the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month, 1918, Veterans Day, signing of the end of World War I, I just want to say to the veterans out there, I'm grateful for your service, and it was an honor to serve amongst you. So, thank you very much.
And Mr. Chair, we are grateful for you and your service to the country. Thank you.
You're here. Thanks, Dan.
That said, we'll move on to item number 1, updates from the admin. We have Lisa Schaefer and Lindsay to join us here. Oh, and Hannah.
Thank you for having us today. I believe we have sent some slides through. It's very exciting. All right, we can just cruise on to the first slide when you're ready. Thank you. Okay, so as you can see, the COVID news, cases are up across the U.S. 7%, and here over the last 2 weeks in Utah as a whole, up 61%. So more critical now than ever to get those boosters, get yourself boosted, because we're all about to spend a lot of holiday time together. And if we don't do that, these numbers just continue to go up. Next slide, please. So we've said this before, the differences between those Pfizer and Moderna boosters, but that's to note that Pfizer is available to ages 5 and up, and Moderna is available to ages 6 and up. So that's who can get boosted, and you can make an appointment or see where you can get your vaccine at the Salt Lake County's vaccine booster website. So feel free to check that out. Next slide. This is some of the county data that we have had previously for you to review. So this gives an accounting of people hospitalized over the last week, people who are up to date state countywide for their vaccinations and their boosters. So we'll kick it over to the next slide. As you can see, we reached a little bit of a low on that October 9th date, but we're starting to see a step up. So the New York Times data is kind of validated, as you can see, and we follow that trend in Salt Lake County as well. Next slide. This is the state's dashboard that they have for waste reclamation facility data, and so this is the one specific to Salt Lake City, and you can kind of see the line there that's kind of picking up where a pickup is happening in COVID. And then on the next slide, we have information again about monkeypox. We did update these statewide numbers. So since May 2022, this is how many cases have happened throughout the county statewide, and we have seen some increases there. So if you are eligible for the monkeypox vaccine, you can contact the Salt Lake County Health Department and schedule your appointment to get that. And then this next slide is additional information about the flu. We all know the flu is here, but one thing that I'll add, I know many of you are parents, some of you to young children, RSV season is also here, and it's supposed to be really bad. So we've kind of got 3 big things going on, the flu, COVID, and RSV. So it's kind of a recipe for potential disaster for hospitals. So the best thing that you can do is be vaccinated where you can. Unfortunately for RSV, there is not a vaccination, but the best way to prevent spreading that to a young child who is at risk of being hospitalized if they catch it is to just keep your hands washed. And if you're feeling sick, just throw on a mask until you don't feel those symptoms anymore. And that's how we can keep each other healthy throughout this season. So, and then the next slide is a interesting tidbit. Intermountain Health has this thing called Germ Watch. So if you want to understand different things like the flu or RSV that are going around in the community, you can check this out, check out their website, and stay up to date on current health issues in the community. So any questions about any of that? Very exciting stuff. Okay, we'll kick it over to you.
All right. Thanks, Lindsay. Next slide, please. Oh, do you have one
more. Sorry. There is RSV activity and flu activity for the state, so just stay healthy. All right, now I think the next slide is
Okay,
yours.
Yes. There we go. Okay. As with most weeks, we started off by directing everyone to the slc.gov/feedback page. That's just where a lot of opportunities for community engagement are posted. Next slide, please. So starting off with some updates from public utilities. First, construction is ramping up on the water reclamation facility. Mayor Mendenhall, Councilmember Wharton, and Public Utilities Advisory Utilities member, I think there's an extra utilities in there, Ted Wilson joined Laura Briefer and the Public Utilities team at the facility for a media event and a tour on November 2nd. Public Utilities consultant is working to determine when other Salt Lake City Council members might be able to tour the construction site. On Tanner Reservoir, Public Utilities has put together a list of potential stakeholders and produced information, including a brochure that can be distributed. And the URL tannerreservoir.com has also been secured. Public Utilities is working on design and programming to have the site connected to the Public Utilities website. Construction is scheduled to begin this month on the City Creek Water Treatment Plant. Architectural visioning of the new buildings for the treatment facility are underway, and Public Utilities is preparing to seek input from key stakeholders and the community on major architectural elements, including roof line, shape, finishes, and building characteristics. Next slide. Maybe? Okay. From Public Lands, the Gateway Triangle Park survey has closed. I believe we mentioned that in our last update, and results are now being evaluated. So conceptual designs will begin this winter.
May I, this is in District 2 now, by the way, not in District 4.
Oh, yeah, sorry, it is in District 2. Yeah, thank you. Next slide, please. From planning, shelter zoning, the planning team is hosting an open house tonight, November 10th, at the Public Safety Building to discuss the updated shelter zoning proposal with community members. And that final proposal will be going to the Planning Commission on December 14th. On the North Point Small Area Plan, the Planning Commission chose to table that item at the October 26th meeting and will revisit that matter at a future date. For ADU modifications, those modifications have gone through the Planning Commission and have been submitted to the City Council. And on affordable housing incentives, the administration is currently holding focus group meetings to offer an extra layer of community feedback. And the focus group is made up of many different community perspectives, but anyone who would like to offer feedback is still encouraged to do so through the Planning Commission and City Council processes. Next slide, please. The Thriving in Place team will provide an update to the Planning Commission on November 16th, including information on the draft anti-displacement framework, which is based on community input and engagement and includes a suite of strategies which altogether intend to help mitigate involuntary displacement. Following input from the Planning Commission, the team will present an updated draft framework to City Council in mid-December. The draft framework is also posted on the website, thrivinginplaceslc.org, and we are asking folks for their review and input via the website. Next slide, please. Okay, a few updates from transportation. First, on the 2100 South reconstruction, engagement continues, and on December 6th, there will be a workshop with businesses and property owners to review the proposed concepts, which will reconstruct 21st South from 7th East to 13th East. On the Capitol Hill traffic calming project, concepts are being finalized and will be discussed this week at the Community Council meeting in collaboration with the Capitol Hill Neighborhood Council to implement some neighborhood traffic calming strategies in that area. On the neighborhood byway projects, the initial round of engagement has recently closed, and the neighborhood byway projects aims to make it better for people to walk and bike safely in the city. These byway projects include Kensington Avenue in the ballpark area, West Point and Jordan Meadows, and Sugarhouse to the U. The transportation team will be summarizing comments and sharing those with the public, and they will also be sending monthly newsletter updates on that project. In Sugarhouse, due to the regional impact of the city's efforts on transformative transportation projects, which include 11th East Highland Drive reconstruction, 14th East reconstruction, 2100 South reconstruction, and the McClellan Trail. Due to all of that impact, the Salt Lake City staff will be presenting at the Holiday Planning Commission next week and the Mill Creek Planning Commission the following week. And lastly, the West Temple reconstruction, that team is holding a stakeholder meeting next week to review preliminary concepts and receive input on the West Temple design. Design info will be posted to the project website later this month, which is slc.gov/mystreet/West Temple. And engineering design will occur in 2023, and then construction will be scheduled for 2024. Next slide, please. Okay, my slides are out of order, that's okay. Okay, this is an update from UDOT. UDOT is studying I-15 capacity improvements, and this is a massive project that they're in a comment period for potential improvement scenarios. So UDOT is holding, I want to make sure, can we go to the next slide, please? Okay, thank you. So UDOT is holding a virtual meeting and 2 in-person open houses, November 14th, 15th, and 16th next week. The same information will be presented at all 3 of those meetings. In an effort to eliminate as many barriers as possible for participation in this meeting, UDOT will be providing meals for those who might be skipping dinner to attend these open houses. They will also have a kids' corner for those who might need to bring children with them to this meeting. And if anyone has transportation barriers to attending these meetings, they have coordinated with UTA's on-demand service to provide free rides to the venues that are within UTA's service area. And if they're not in UTA's service area, Uber will be providing free rides for those outside UTA's service area. So for those who aren't able to make any of those open houses, UDOT is planning on recording the virtual meeting and posting it on their website later that week. Next slide, please. UDOT is sharing information on this project through direct mail, posters and flyers in the study area, social media, and other avenues. And the contact information for the project team is on this slide for email, phone, and website on that. Next slide, please. Okay. Just wanted to provide a couple updates on the Sugarhouse fire. The mayor's office and economic development met this week with the businesses that are currently closed as a result of the Sugarhouse fire. 6 businesses currently remain closed, and economic development is working with them to file interrupted business insurance claims. Grant McKay Demolition Company moved in heavy equipment last night so that they can start demolition today, weather permitting, and can fast-track the demolition permitting process so they could get started on that as soon as possible. Construction crews have been on site clearing pathways of debris, wow. And Utopia Internet was restored Wednesday evening. The mayor's office and economic development are working on increased signage and promotion to let people know which businesses are currently open and people can visit. And last week on Friday, CAN worked with the contractor Kirk Construction to open the intersection at Highland Drive in Wilmington. So things are continuing to move there. Next slide, please. Okay, this is our 4th month of doing community office hours, so I wanted to remind everyone that the mayor's office will be throughout all 7 of the city's districts in different local businesses and spots to make ourselves more accessible. Our goal is to be where people already are and engage with them and give them an opportunity to speak with our office and ask questions and have any conversations that they want to with us. So those are the spots that we will be in the month of November. Next slide, please. I want to let everyone know that the 2023 ACE Fund application is now open, and that will be open until December 13th. The ACE Fund is administered by the mayor's office and supports neighborhood and community events in Salt Lake City. There are 4 information sessions to learn more about the ACE Fund. The first one was actually last night, so there will be 3 more sessions on November 16th, 21st, and 29th. Next slide, please. And lastly, just want to let everyone know about upcoming events in the month of November. Starting this Saturday, November 12th, is the first winter farmers market of the season, and those run every Saturday through April 15th at the Gateway. And Public Lands, their park ranger team is hosting Jingle and Mingle events at Pioneer Park this holiday season. You can see that there's 4 of those dates there. This will be an opportunity for folks to come meet the new park rangers that are assigned to Pioneer Park, and the rangers will be handing out vouchers for free hot chocolate from a food truck that will be on site. And there will also be holiday lights on 16 large trees in Pioneer Park along the north edge for the first time ever. So these events are also a fun way to get people out to enjoy lights at the park. And those events will be from 5 p.m. to 8 p.m. And that's all I have. Any questions?
No, you go ahead.
Oh, thank you very much, Hannah.
I believe we have Andrew Johnston online for the update on homelessness, which is the next slide.
Am I up now?
You are.
You are up. Thank you, Andrew.
Welcome. Sorry, Council, I can't see you, but I apologize for being remote today. We did change up the slide, as you can tell in front of you, about the census capacities for the current resource centers as well as the overflows for this winter. You can see Geraldine, Gail Miller, and then Pamela Atkinson. For those who don't know, the South Salt Lake Men's Resource Center was renamed for Pamela Atkinson recently. So going forward, that will be the name we present. All the current capacities are over 96%. You'll see Mill Creek Library overflow with 100 beds. Just opened on the 1st, so a little over a week ago. They've been averaging about 33% that first week. And then the HRC flex beds we've talked about before, between all 3 facilities, they've been running at about 41% capacity. It is a little slow to begin the season. We would anticipate that would go up over time. And then I apologize, I don't have the St. Vincent overflow numbers for last week on average. I believe they were running about half capacity last I had an update, though. Next slide. There's some process stuff that you've probably heard before. There's been a lot of information put out to the community about the overflow plans for this winter. On the left-hand side, you can see the number we've always talked about for accessing the coordinated entry system into the shelters or overflows, 801-990-9999. On the right, you'll see that the current plan through the Salt Lake Valley Coalition to End Homelessness and the providers is to utilize the Wiegand Center at Rio Grande Street downtown as kind of the centralized intake reservation place. Because of the number of overflow locations, it is very difficult to do remote intakes at all of them. And so the decision was made to try and do it as much as possible downtown at the existing day resource center where people are for meals, et cetera. So you can see there that they have community, Utah Community Action staff who do the intakes at the Rio Grande location at Wiegand Center from 2 o'clock on through the afternoon and early evening every day. Anybody can go there and get reserved for a bed at one of the locations. You can see that the overflow beds open at 7 p.m. each night and then close in the morning the following morning. Transportation is provided through a variety of means from Rio Grande to each of the overflow locations. There are buses to some. The existing shuttle system is running between all of them as well, and they begin about 6:30 each night from downtown out to the resource center areas, and then from the overflow locations every morning starting about 5:30 till 7 back down to Rio Grande. And you can see the meal schedule after that, which is part of the reason they come downtown again for food. And then personal storage is a big issue, as you probably are aware, for a lot of folks who are experiencing unsheltered homelessness. And so a place for your stuff there on 5th West has extended their hours for the wintertime, particularly in the afternoons from 4 to 8 p.m. So folks can leave stuff there that's safe, go and access things on a daily basis to get it out as they need them. I think the provider network is doing their best to accommodate things under difficult circumstances. That is the last slide for homelessness updates. Are there questions, Mr. Chair?
Council, any questions for Andrew? I don't see any questions, Andrew.
Well, thank you.
That is the last slide for us.
Well, thank you, Andrew. Hannah, thank you very much. Lindsay,
Thank you.
thank you. Council, moving on to item number 2, equity update. We have Moana and Michelle. And, we have, and Coletta. Oh, and Coletta was there for a second.
I'm still here, Councilmember Dugan.
Oh,
Can you see me or hear me?
hey, great to see you.
Hi, it's great to see you all also. And thank you all for giving us time today for the equity update. So we have a brief PowerPoint, and here it is right here. Thank you. Next slide, please. So I have a couple of quick staff updates for you all. As you all are already aware, many of you are, my family and I are relocating, so it's kind of bittersweet. I'm leaving the city, and I'm gonna miss working with you all very dearly. It has been such a pleasure being here to serve the people of Salt Lake City in the capacity that I have been in. And thank you, council members and Mayor Mendenhall and everyone that I worked with at the city for all of your support and your kindness as I've been in this position. Me and my team greatly appreciate you all. I just want to let you know that there is a search currently underway for the new chief equity officer. And so you'll be receiving more updates about that search fairly soon. The top candidates are moving forward to the final round of interviews. So just wanted to let you know that that is underway. Also, Fatima has made the decision to move in a different direction, and I just wanted to thank her for her service and her time here at Salt Lake City. But I also wanted to announce today that our new policy advisor for refugees and new Americans is Roxana. So Roxana, who was our language access coordinator, is now our policy advisor for refugees and new Americans. And we also have a new Know Your Neighbor volunteer coordinator, and her name is Kristen Hansen. And if you recall, council members, thank you so much for your approval of the recent funding and acceptance of funding from the state for the Know Your Neighbor volunteer coordinator position. I hopefully will get one additional update with you before I leave, and I plan to bring Kristen and Roxana back to you to give you an update on the Know Your Neighbor program. So I would love to introduce Kristen to you next time, but she is the Vista that has been performing this job as a Vista for the last year in collaboration with the state. And so she has been doing the responsibilities of the new Know Your Neighbor position over the last year and a half. Also, there's a current job posting up now for the language access coordinator position. So I encourage anyone who is interested in that position to please apply on our HR website. And finally, this one's kind of bittersweet too, but Moana is leaving us in December. She is going to take some time with her family, and so I just greatly appreciate all that Moana has done at the city during her entire time here. And I wanted to let you know that we're making a transition of Michelle into the equity manager position at the end of December. And so Moana and Michelle have been doing some succession training and planning to make sure that there are no gaps in the management and the collaboration with the HRC and the REP. Next slide, please. So I wanted to also give you a citywide equity plan update. So Keene Independent Research Team has concluded their meetings, their workshops, surveys, and all other work with department directors, city staff, community organizations, and community members. They have reviewed and organized all feedback, analyzed data, and completed the related literature reviews to be included with the plan with recommendations and best practices. And so the next phase of this is for the draft of the report to go back to GEAR ambassadors. As a reminder, we have a GEAR ambassador as part of the group from each city department. And so GEAR ambassadors will have an opportunity to review the draft. Cabinet members and city staff, some additional city staff members will have the opportunity to review the draft and send final feedback and revisions. And then the equity plan will be forthcoming for the mayor and for you all city council members to review. So we look forward to any updates or any feedback that you have for us for this plan. Next slide. I want to turn time over to Moana and Michelle for the next 2 slides.
So my name is Michelle, and I will be talking about the Racial Equity and Policing Commission update. We're currently in phase 2, which consists of reviewing, adopting, and implementing all of the phase 1 recommendations that were outlined in the phase 1 report. Over the past year, the REP commissioners and SLCPD have worked collaboratively to follow up with recommendations currently in progress, as well as track those that are up next for implementation. While SLCPD has integrated and implemented many of the recommendations from phase 1, as highlighted in their phase 1 response, we have learned that it is more feasible to focus on completing at least 1 to 2 institutional changes per year, so that both the commission as well as SLCPD doesn't get overwhelmed with that. Also, the commissioners continue to be integrated into the city through their participation in hiring committees, budgetary reviews, policy recommendations, review of the MOU for school resource officers with the Senior Advisor for Education. Next slide, please. The Human Rights Commission update consists of the Human Rights Day celebration, which will happen on Saturday, December 10th from 6 to 8 p.m. at the Sorensen Unity Center. It'll be in the Black Box Theater. This year's theme is Advancing Human Rights. Nominations for the event have closed on October 31st, and the HRC has voted on the award recipients. The HRC's annual end-of-year report is also complete and has been voted upon by the commissioners for approval. The report is forthcoming to the mayor and city council for consideration, and the REP report will be forthcoming after they vote on it in December's meeting. Next slide. And I will pass it back to,
I just want to thank the City Council for their assistance and their help this past year as we worked on the Human Rights Commission with and Racial Equity and Policing Commission, especially your support in many of the initiatives as well as budgetary items from both commissions. The mayor tasked me with a couple of things to do for both of the commissions along with Coletta, and after completing those this year, felt like the mantle should be passed on to some new energy, and you all understand that as well. I'm still in Salt Lake City. We'll be supporting all of the efforts that this mayor as well as the city council has done over the years, and I think it's bittersweet, and it's been a pleasure to serve Salt Lake City as a lifetime member of this city myself. I've really appreciated the work that this mayor and this administration, along with the city council, has done in the last couple of years. And I just like to say that how proud I am of the representation that we've had. And I've been in the city in and out for over the last decade. I can't believe that that's possible, but to see the changes, and that's what I always say, I'm a proud SLC girl till the day I die, especially the West Side. So thank you all. Who knows what the future will bring, revolving door, this city, and the good work you all do. So thank you. And please come celebrate on December 10th.
yes,
Right.
please.
Moana, I want to say thank you from the bottom of my heart and from the council heart, because you've done a tremendous job. I love the energy, love the passion, love your drive and your support in helping transform the city and educating the council on racial equity, the human rights side of the house, and the justice. So you've been wonderful and a blessing to us. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair.
Coletta?
And Coletta?
Yes, and the final update that I have is the language access update. So the language access administrative policy was recently approved and added to the city's policy manual in September. and an implementation plan and procedures has been drafted and is forthcoming. Also, I wanted to update you all that each department has named a language access liaison to work with whoever the new language access coordinator may be. In the interim, though, Moana and I are fielding all Roxana and I are fielding all requests for language access until there is a new person put in position for language access coordinator. And also accounts are available, and Roxana has provided directions to departments on how to access those language services vendors that we have contracts with through Language Line Solutions. Next slide, please. We have a lot of things going on in ADA. Through our ADA coordinator, Ashley. She's doing an amazing job. She recently gained her ADA coordinator certification, and that was a requirement within 2 years of her employment. She got it done in the first year, so I just want to congratulate her on getting her certification done. We also recently hosted, in collaboration with partners, the first annual White Cane Walk, and Ashley has provided departments a virtual accessible meeting guide and accessible public events checklist. And right now, some of the conversations that Ashley is involved in have to do with snow removal and the public right-of-way for accessibility reasons, especially. And she has also been working to get some updates done to the SLC mobile app so that they're more digitally accessible for residents and visitors. And so you will also see that she has a citywide policy review happening in coordination with departments to touch on general non-discrimination, effective communication, and web accessibility. Next slide, please. And finally, I just want to close by giving you an update that we are making progress with GARE. GARE, we are members of the Government Alliance of Race and Equity. We were one of the first municipalities in the state of Utah to join GARE. And there's a conference coming up November the 17th through the 19th in Arizona. Darby is going to participate virtually in that conference, but there will be other city staff members participating in that conference from all city departments. So they will have the option to participate if approved by their managers. And then GARE ambassadors are currently focusing on compiling equitable best practice recommendations as it relates to marketing, recruitment, and outreach. And once these recommendations are put in a report, they will be forthcoming to Mayor Mendenhall, Human Resources, and you all city council members for future consideration. So again, I just want to thank you for your time. And thank you again for our work together and your support and your leadership. And hopefully this is not my last equity update. Hopefully I get one more before I leave.
Well, Coletta, thank you very much for that update. But since we have you on the screen, I want to say thank you for all your leadership and your drive to making the city move forward in racial equity, justice and policing, and across the board. You've done a tremendous job building this organization, and you've passed it down here. And I see Michelle's right here, and she's excited to move forward. She may be a little nervous, but I think she's excited. And I just loved working with you, and thank you very much for everything you've done for the city.
Thank you, council member, and thank you to the rest of the council members also.
Have a great day.
You do the same.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Moving on to item number, we're going to skip items. We're going to skip ahead on a couple items since we're ahead on schedule on a few things. We're going to move on to item number 5, since we have them here on the rezone, the master plan amendment, and alley vacation at 1550 South Main Street assemblage. And we got Wayne and Brian. There's Brian Fulmer. And we have Wayne Mills.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is a proposal to amend the zoning map for properties at 1518, 1530, 1540, and 1645 South Main Street, as well as 1515 South Richards Street, from the current Corridor Commercial District and R1 5000 Single-Family Residential designations to FBUN2 or Form-Based Urban Neighborhood District. I should note a request to vacate a city-owned alley adjacent to the properties is also included. You might make note that the proposal originally included amending the Central Community Master Plan future land use map, but that is no longer included. Wayne will go over that a little bit in his presentation, and I'll turn it over to him.
Thank you. We should have a presentation coming up.
Here it is.
And Wayne, you're going to have to bring that mic really close to you when you kind of turn your head.
Got it.
There, perfect. Thank you.
Next slide, please. So as Brian had mentioned, this is a proposal to rezone multiple parcels. One is R1 5000, single family right now. The others are CC Corridor Commercial. The request is to rezone all of those parcels to form-based zone FBUN2. Excuse me, the intent is to combine all the parcels as well as the requested vacated alley into one mixed-use development. Next slide, please. And this just provides a little overview of the area we're looking at. There's currently an old motel site there and a couple of existing residential structures. Next slide, please. Just a little info on the existing and proposed zoning. Height is always a big deal for people that surround these types of things. And in this case, the existing CC zone allows building height to 30 feet by right and then 45 feet through the design review process. Excuse me, the FBUN2 would actually allow buildings the max height up to 50 feet. That would be by right without going through a process, but the allowable height between the two zones is pretty similar. It's about 5 feet difference. There's a couple of other things. In the Planning Commission staff report, we provided a comparison between the existing and proposed zoning districts. There's a couple of things of interest in that. The CC zone doesn't have a lot of design criteria built into it, whereas the FBUN2 does. The FBUN2 also requires some building height step back things when they are adjacent to single family residential. And in this case, this property is. So the building height would have to step back a certain distance before it can go back up, and I could get you those details a little bit more if you'd like those.
Wayne, sorry, Mr. Chair. So currently it is zoned the CC.
That's correct.
That's right.
Yep.
Okay. And the FBUN2 does require setbacks?
They require setbacks and step backs.
What is the difference?
So the step back is in relation to building height. So yeah,
right.
so if you're
Okay.
within a certain distance of a zone or a building or whatever,
You can't just go straight up
you
to
can't just go straight up to
10
50
stories
feet.
or something.
That's right. Yep.
Okay.
The
And then,
setback is the building distance between the property line.
and does FBUN2 require setbacks?
It does, yes. I went a little old school and printed out some papers here, so because there's so much involved in this.
I'm old. I got you, Wayne. I'm old too. It's fine.
Yeah, as far as the setbacks go, the CC zone actually does not require an interior side setback. So that's if you look at a typical building lot, you have front, back, and two sides. Corner lots are a little different because you're going to have one rear, one interior side, and then the other two have street frontage, which this is going to be a giant corner lot if everything gets approved. So the current zone, CC, has a rear yard requirement of 10 feet, but doesn't have any interior side yard requirement. But, excuse me, I'm recovering from COVID from a couple weeks ago, so I'm still got it. Well, I still don't have it. I'm not breathing COVID all over this thing, so.
Thank you.
Yeah. So anyway, there is a buffer requirement in the CC zone. So when a CC zone abuts a residential zoning district, such as single family, they have to do extra landscaping at a distance of 7 feet. Now the FBUN2 actually has a side yard requirement of 15 feet when it's adjacent to single family, and then a rear requirement of 20 feet when adjacent to single family residential. So it actually does have a little bit more setback, and then there's that additional upper level building step back that's in place.
Wayne, did you mention the front and corner side yard setbacks?
The front, the CC zone has a front and corner side yard setback of 15 feet, whereas in the FBUN2, there actually is not a minimum. So you can build up to the property line for this type of the development that they'd like to do.
Is it fair to say that the current zoning setbacks would tend to push the building closer to the houses and further away from the street, and this FBUN2 would tend to do the opposite? Is that a fair?
Yeah, correct.
Okay,
correct.
Thanks.
So the,
Darren, can you repeat what you just said?
So it sounds like the current zoning, just looking at the setbacks, would tend to push the building closer to the houses and further away from the street, whereas the proposed zone would be the opposite.
That's right.
That's fair. Okay.
Yeah, that's right. And it's also, things are never that cut and dry, because in the CC zone, you can build up to 30 feet by right. But if you go up to 45 feet, if you want to go up to 45 feet, you have to go through design review process. And it's through the design review process, the Planning Commission could potentially require some additional building setbacks or height reductions if there's shown to be an impact on the adjacent properties. But would depend on how that goes through the process.
and that design review doesn't come back to us. That just stays with the Planning Commission at that point.
That's correct.
Correct.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Quick question about the properties. There's one within the yellow boxes that is R1 5000, and that will be within this
That's correct.
proposal. And the alley, the propose is to also vacate the alley.
Correct.
Correct. Okay.
Yes.
So basically, the only abutting single-family homes will be the ones south. Correct?
That's correct. Directly abutting would be to the south, and I believe there's some homes across Richard Street to the west. That's not directly abutting, so those
Not
more,
directly
but it's just, to give you an idea of adjacency, I guess.
Okay.
All right, let's go to the next slide. So the master plan amendment issue, when this petition came in, the ballpark plan had not yet been adopted. In fact, it hadn't yet been sent to the Planning Commission for review. So at the time, it was the Central Community Master Plan that kind of reigned over when it comes to planning stuff over this area. And the petition included an amendment to that Central Community Master Plan. Well, since that time, the ballpark plan has gone to the City Council and has been adopted, so the Central Community Master Plan amendment is no longer needed because the ballpark plan actually overrides the Central Community Plan. So the adjustments have been made to the adopting ordinance, just so that that's clear when you get to that point in your decision-making process. So let's go to the next slide. I'd give you a little info on what the ballpark station area plan says.
Can I, Mr. Chair? So does this petition align with the now ballpark plan, master plan?
Certain elements, yes. Maybe not all elements. It's I'm going to get into a little bit of that now.
Okay,
Yeah.
sorry.
Yeah, no, you're fine.
I'll let you go.
The ballpark station area plan identifies this area. It's that little red circle down there. That's actually the subject properties up there on the screen. It's kind of straddles the Main Street character area, which is defined by small local businesses, pedestrian bike environment, medium density residential buildings. There's a little bit of guidance in here that talks about how new development should focus on maintaining the scale, walkability, and bikeability of the neighborhood. Next slide, please. The future land use plan shows that, again, that red circle down there, shows that the intersection of a future Main Street and Kensington Avenue bike routes. And then it talks about the property being in the what's called the Main Street area and the neighborhood area. And the alley is kind of the approximate dividing line between those areas. Next slide, please. Little info on the Main Street area. Between Kensington Avenue and 1700 South, which is what this area is, along Main Street, the plan calls for redeveloping into a medium density area that utilizes current building scale and massing to guide future development. The plan talks about how new development should be really no taller than 3 stories with front doors on Main Street, stoops, and yards. So with the proposal, the number of stories would actually be an additional story over what this plan calls for. This plan, as it says, 3 stories, whereas the FBUN2 actually allows for 4 stories for mixed-use development. The interesting thing is that just north of Kensington, which is the northern boundary of this property, the plan actually calls for 3 to 4 stories. So if it could kind of go either way, I guess, in the way that you look at it, because it typically, when we look at, just from an urban design standpoint, building heights being kind of greater at the street intersections at the block corners. So in this case, approving what could be 4 stories at this intersection at this block corner would actually create kind of a cohesive urban design, I guess, element at that intersection there. But again, it is 1 additional story than what the plan calls for. However, when it talks about having front doors on Main Street, stoops, yards, things of that nature, the FBUN2 would actually encourage that more of an urban environment than what the CC would. Also, another little thing in here is the parking should be set back from street and located aside of rear buildings, whereas the FBUN2 actually does have more regulations when it comes to locations of parking and things like that to create more of an urban type situation.
Just one thing on the parking.
Yes.
I thought FBN2 didn't have a off-street parking requirement.
That's correct. That's another big difference between the 2 zones is that the CC does require parking, depending on the land use, of course. Whereas the FBUN2, there is no parking minimum required. Let's go to the next slide. The neighborhood area, which is the western part of this property, is it does talk about that area being a little bit lower in scale. It's not a lot of information, but other than saying that the scale and density should be maintained. Redevelopment of vacant abandoned structures at a comparable scale and character as the existing housing stock. So this would actually allow for quite a bit more kind of bigger scale and intensity than what is actually there now. Let's go to the next slide. This project does require housing loss mitigation because it's removing existing residential homes. There's as of right now, 6 existing housing units in the area, in that subject project area, and they're be proposed to be removed. So it requires housing loss mitigation. And there's a bunch of different options that can be chosen through the housing mitigation process. The applicants have chosen to replace the housing that is there now, because that's actually part of their future development proposal, would be to build a mixed-use project with multifamily housing. And there's a housing mitigation report in in the Planning Commission staff report. Next slide, sorry. Just a real quick little thing about the alley. It runs through the existing development. Sorry, I should have had the map up there, that would have helped. But the existing alley is actually blocked off. It's just currently used for storage and parking right now. So it kind of been swallowed by private uses. And it essentially kind of ends into the rear yard of the existing single-family homes that are just to the south. Next slide, please. So the Planning Commission voted unanimously in support of the rezone, with just the kind of standard recommended conditions that staff had listed. And next slide, and that's the end of my presentation. The applicants are here. They would, I think, like to do a presentation.
Yeah, let's see if we have first questions. Any questions for Wayne? Councilmember Mono.
Wayne, I guess it was a little unclear. You said it sort of fits and sort of doesn't fit with the adopted ballpark station area plan, but it fits enough that they don't need to do a master plan amendment. Can you kind of explain where that sweet spot is that we're in, or why that's the case?
It does get tricky. You know, master plan amendments always get a little tricky with zoning amendments because, in all honesty, they're not actually required anyway. What the factors that the city council needs to consider, or what the ordinance says that the council should consider when adopting or reviewing a zoning amendment, one of those is the master plan. But then what the standards say is that you can go ahead and change the zoning if you want without really considering any of those. It's a legislative item, and so you have that power to do it. So they really isn't a requirement for them to amend the master plan. We do encourage it in most cases just because it's good to have consistency between the plan and the zoning. But I think in this case, it was a bit of an odd situation with how the petition came in at the time it did. And we spoke to the applicants and said, that there's a risk here, that, we're kind of going with an existing master plan that's in place, with a master plan that's, underway, and there's a risk it's going to be a little confusing. But, they needed to move forward with that process. So, you kind of have the ballpark plan in front of you. There isn't a petition to amend the ballpark plan right now. It's just something that you need to consider in your decision.
Any other questions for Wayne? So I would invite the applicant forward. Thank you very much, Wayne. Ryan.
Brian, do you have the presentation? Yeah, they'll bring it up.
And thank you very much for joining us. Just kind of state your names, and then we have a 5-minute time limit.
Stephen Alfondre with Urban Alfondre, part of the applicant.
James Alfondre with Urban Alfondre.
And Brian, if I give you the notch, can you advance the presentation?
We have folks doing that, so if you'll just state when you want it advanced, they will do that for you.
Members of the council, thank you for having us today. We are here to present what we think is a very reasonable case to rezone this property. If you could kindly advance the presentation. We have 3 reasons why we think this makes a lot of sense. First, this adds housing in a transportation-rich location. Second, there are environmental benefits of infill housing And third, there is a desperate need to revitalize Main Street and get rid of this current use that exists. If you could go forward.
Don't be intimidated. Our watches told us to stand up, so that's why we're standing. I just didn't
So I
want
could
you to be
stand
like,
too if
what's
I-
happening
okay.
right now? Why are all the council members standing?
No problem. This is a transportation-rich location, and we'll show you a map right after this. This gives equity for lots of different residents who can live in the city and not have to own a car. And it increases safety by putting people on the streets. Next slide, please. So with this map, you see the red is the location of the site. It is a 1/2 mile, 10-minute walk to a track station. On State Street, just adjacent, there are buses that go straight to downtown every 15 minutes. There is a bike lane right in front of the property, and it takes 9 minutes to get downtown. Sorry, on the bike, it takes 13 minutes. We tested it, and 9 minutes to get downtown. There are very few locations in the city that provide such good transportation optionality. Next slide, please. Second, there are tremendous environmental benefits of infill development. Next slide, please. The first is the city of San Diego has created as their emphasis, let's see if it'll advance here.
Here we go.
Infill development to help conserve water. And we've seen this, that infill reduces overall water demand. And second, the EPA has measured the impacts of air quality when you can locate properties near transportation optionality. It increases the ability to, well, it decreases car trips and increases other modes of transportation. This location with 4 really good transportation optionality makes a lot of sense. Next slide, please. And finally, there is a major need to revitalize this area of Main Street. Crime is plaguing the neighborhood, and the use on this property is a motel that is the hub for crime in the area. The character of Main Street doesn't exist, and by going to the FBUN2 zone, it starts to establish a better urban pattern for the neighborhood. Our plan would add residents, street life, and we've even offered through a development agreement to add some off-street parking and retail. Next slide, please. This is a current view of Main Street. As you can see, there's already a 30-foot buffer between the street and the property line in the park strip. There's been a lot of talk about setbacks and what that would do, but we feel that putting an FBUN2 zone building here would create a much better urban environment for the pedestrians and neighbors.
The ballpark plan also calls for syncing up the setbacks on the east side of Main Street to the west side of Main Street to create more continuity and a more continuous urban wall, which this accomplishes.
And that is our presentation.
Thank you very much. Any questions, Councilman?
You mentioned a development agreement for parking and retail. Can you just give me a little more details on that?
Yeah, we've talked to the neighbors. We met with them quite a bit, and we've offered to put in a minimum of 0.5 spaces per unit, and retail fronting Main Street at a minimum of 1,000 and a maximum of 2,000 square feet.
And we've worked in the FBUN2 zone before. We have a couple projects in Central 9th, and on 9th South, we have 4,000 square feet of retail there. We also have on off-street parking as well. So we're very familiar with this zone, and the reason we like it is we're residents of the city. We live here. We work here. Our kids go to school here. We want to create enduring value in neighborhoods that provide more transportation optionality, that provide a mix of uses from ground floor commercial to residential above. It just makes our neighborhood better, as the master plans call for, moving more towards that. As we deal with our outdated zoning, how can we move towards a more vibrant urban product, especially on Main Street. And we want to set a precedence here for Main Street of very well designed with a mix of uses to create more vibrancy and more transportation optionality for residents.
Hey, Councilmember Fowler.
Yeah, a couple of comments. So I'm obviously very familiar with you guys and the 9th Central area. And I have heard some feedback from the neighbors within, that was kind of that first time we decided to do this different type of forum-based zone over there. And there has been some concerns from neighbors that have been living in that neighborhood for a very long time regarding the parking issue. And so how, in knowing that and learning that from being over there and having a project over there, how would you address that? Is that being addressed, in your opinion, by just this 0.5 per unit?
0.5 is the minimum. It allows us to respond to the market demand. It would likely go higher than 0.5, but we've put parking in every building in our FBUN2, even though we're not required to do it, because as responsible property developers, our residents want parking.
Okay.
Parking is also very expensive, and so those costs get passed on to the residents. And when we can be in a place like Main Street or infill development where we can kind of get to a point where providing parking for people who want it, but also giving people optionality to not have to pay for parking, we feel like it gives people optionality when they're looking to save costs or spend costs on parking.
Sure. And I appreciate that. There was another thing I was going to say. Hold, please. It will come back to me.
I would also say the residents at 9th South who've been there for a long time are very lucky. They have a yard and they have a garage, and now they get to walk to tracks and they get to walk to all these great amenities, while people who are now coming to live there don't have that kind of opportunity that they do as well.
Can you, just a question on the housing side of the house, is it mixed income? Is it,
we are not putting any deed restriction, but what we do in our company is we design units that fit a variety of incomes. We have 1 beds as small as 375 square feet, all the way up to 2 and 3 beds at 1,100 square feet. We don't have an exact unit mix right now, but that's what we've done on all of our properties so that it appeals to a wider group of people.
So the idea would be that you're not specifically talking about mixed income, but you're going to...
Market rate attainable, which it's not deed restricted, but there will be a mix of incomes based on the size of units and the rents.
Okay.
So a lot of people are providing 700, 800 square foot 1 beds. That size is big, that price is big. We have units for 450 to 500 square feet that are true 1 bedrooms. So it brings the price down. So Anna was able to come to one of our projects, row 17, where we really, instead of doing a full townhome, we did a stacked product. And what that did was bring the unit size down, and we were able to sell entry-level units in the mid-200s, which was unheard of at the time. So we try to reach affordability or attainability through design.
That just drove me to another question. So these will be for rental, but you were just talking about for sale. These are all rentals.
Correct.
There's no sale. These are all rentals.
Correct.
No for sale.
Correct.
Okay.
So
So
does that mean family size units would not be in an affordable range?
So we're doing a project just a half a block north of 2 and 3 bedroom townhomes to try to bring more families to the area. This we will probably fit in some 2 bedrooms. It's just a different product type.
So then with an encouragement, this is going to be my new thing since we got back from the conference, with the encouragement for people to rely on public transit and alternative modes, a 375 square foot unit, no one should be expected to store a bike in that. I'm assuming that you're planning out for not just weatherized, secure amenities that would allow people to store them on site, but we've actually pivoted to wanting to encourage even maintenance facilities, places where people can change their tires and those sorts of things. Are those sorts of things that you're going to calculate into your space?
In every property in the FBUN2, we've added bike rooms with secure storage and maintenance facility.
We're big on optionality, from biking to walking to everything. So having those amenities to allow residents to do that is important to us.
And knowing the condition of the sidewalks there, I really do have difficulty saying that this makes transit more accessible for people with disabilities. That feels a little bit like a reach. And considering how many sidewalks have been closed down in Central 9th, causing ADA accessibility issues, I'd be very interested in the building phase and how we're going to preserve any ADA accessibility during the construction phase as well, which has been a perennial problem in the Central 9th area.
It's just hard to do. We deal with the sidewalks we're given and the streets that we're given, and there's building codes that we have to adhere to. But
there's the covered sidewalks that we could put up to protect people. And if we're going to make the case that we're ADA accessible and improving that, then the construction process can't be exempt from that.
Right.
Councilmember Puig.
So let me ask, there is just a block or so south of this, there is that gigantic, I call it gigantic, apartment complex.
Towers on Main.
Yeah. And which is larger in height than
7 stories.
Okay, and your parking strips. I'm just jumping all over the place on some of my thoughts on this. And this parking strip that we have here is ginormous, and we saw it last week when we went for coffee with a council member here. And I will love for you guys to think about being smart with water on these things according to whatever rules we end up deciding to do with the city. And I feel very strongly about family housing and having, and I know you just said that you probably going to fit some two-bedroom units. I will feel very comfortable if you, on this project, if you likely fit two-bedroom apartments onto this. We need more family houses in this city, and there is not a city without families. If not, this is just a student, place. So that is something that I feel very strongly about. I had another thing. I feel like maybe it's contagious. I will remember in a minute.
Just so you know, just north of this, at 1448 Main Street, we're building only 2- and 3-bedroom units right there.
Yeah, no, and
it's important to us too. We need more families in the city.
Yeah, and I appreciate that, and I think you're doing wonderful on that one. Let's see if we can also do some wonderful things in this one too.
And just in all our FBUN2 buildings that we're building now, we have 2 bedrooms in with 1 bed as well, and those are in building permit phase, so we can show you that information as well. For us, we like providing a wide range of options for all sorts of residents. So if we were to just do a building with micro units or just a building with 1 beds, it doesn't do that. And for us to be smart business people, it widens up our pool of tenants, right, to fill our spaces as well. So we're in line with you on that as well.
All right. Thank you very much. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
You guys have a great evening. Oh, sorry, Councilmember Fowler.
Yeah.
Oh, she remembered.
I did. Sorry.
Last question there.
I am sure you have, because I've looked at the Planning Commission staff report, and I have definitely heard a lot of feedback regarding the front setbacks and the fact that the FBUN2 does not require that front setback, and that your project would not include a front setback, and how that, as was mentioned by Wayne in his presentation, that some of this plan, even though it was forwarded with a positive recommendation by the Planning Commission, doesn't line up with the ballpark master plan. Given, I recognize the weird timing of things, but we're here now, and we are where we're at, and I am sure that there is an ability to change the plan or alter things or the design, change the design to match up or meet some of these concerns that residents have. So I'm not sure there's a question there, more of that is what I'm hearing, and I'm curious.
And we've thought long and hard about this. So a couple things. There's no setback along Main on the east side of Main Street. this will true up that to get a continuous urban wall that is important for walkability and just human scale, pedestrian scale. As you can see in that picture we showed, Main Street is 4 lanes wide with 30-foot setbacks to the property line. If we want to start being serious about pedestrian activity in vibrant streets, we really have to start looking at how we can bring buildings to the front of the street, but with that, have requirements for activation on the ground floor. That's why we're proposing through a development agreement that we want to provide commercial and also residences along the ground floor. That's why we love the FBUN2 zone, because it requires a lot of that. The neighborhood is concerned about front yards and setbacks, but we're talking about Main Street here, right? We're not talking about like a block 2 on Richards. That is single family zoned housing for a reason. Those front yards are going to stay there. On Main Street, instead of a setback off 30 feet and then a building, we're bringing the building up and we're providing coffee shops. So instead of meeting at someone's front yard, you can come down to the coffee shop and meet, or you can walk out your door. It's more eyes on the street. It's more activity. It's a better pedestrian environment that brings more eyes on the street and really starts to bring more people out onto the street.
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you for your
You guys have
time.
a great day.
Thank you.
Now we're going to, I know we have UDOT here, but we need a 15-minute break. So thanks for coming in early, but we'll be taking a break now till, let's see, 4:28. meeting. We're going to transition to item number 3, Little Cottonwood Canyon Environmental Impact Statement information briefing from UDOT. We have Josh, Terry, and Brianna, and is Lance also here? Gotcha. Come on forward, and we'll take a seat. We've given 30 minutes for the brief presentation, so probably there may be a few questions, so give yourself 20 minutes. All right?
20 minutes is the goal for the
20
presentation?
minutes is the goal for the presentation.
Perfect. I've done this from anywhere from 6 to 40.
Okay.
So we'll shoot for 20 today.
Well, yeah, I would love that. That'd be great.
Just going to keep a timer here. So.
Thanks for joining us here this evening. And I think you probably have some slides. I know we.
Yeah, Linda had told me someone was going to have them loaded.
There they are.
There we go.
And just say, switch, someone magically behind that screen will hit the button.
Absolutely. So I'm Josh Fanjura. I'm UDOT's project manager. If you don't recognize my voice from the videos, or I've met many of you before, I'll let Bree and Lance introduce themselves.
Hello, I'm Bree Binaboos. I'm the public involvement manager for the project.
I'm Lance Cole with the UN Wasatch Cache National Forest. I am the Forest Service project manager for UDOT's Little Cottonwood Canyon EIS.
Well, thank you, and thank you for having us today. This is obviously a project that many people in the community are very involved with, and we've heard over 35,000 comments, and that's phenomenal. That's far more than any project UDOT has ever done. There's certainly been projects nationally that have gotten more, but for Utah, I think we're a factor of 7 greater comments. So lots of great public involvement. I'll go through the presentation really quickly. I will potentially say next slide multiple times because I wanted to have the information available for any follow-up questions, and I didn't know what questions were going to be asked. So I left all the slides in, so I apologize. Hopefully we need them later. So if we can go to the next slide, please. This project, this is the only slide I will read verbatim, I promise you. But the project's purpose and need, this is the goal that the project is trying to solve, is to improve the mobility, reliability, and safety on SR 210 from Fort Union Boulevard up through the town of Alta. So for us, mobility is really a measure of congestion. Reliability is how confident are you that it'll take you to get to your destination. And of course, safety is something that UDOT's always concerned about. In 2050, we estimate that it's going to take 80 to 85 minutes to go from the 7-Eleven or the mouth of Big Cottonwood, milepost 0, up through the town of Alta. Today, it's about 21 minutes. So it's 4 times longer to get up there 50 days a year. So that's basically every Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and holiday weekend. It's going to take 80 to 85 minutes. Also, this high level of traffic congestion results in a lot of traffic backing, as you would guess, right? Queuing. On Wasatch Boulevard, that's expected to back up about 2.5 miles. So for the residents in this neighborhood, I believe there's 11 streets that intersect Wasatch. It makes it really difficult to get to your kid's sporting event, run to the grocery store on a Saturday morning. You literally can't get out of your neighborhood. So again, by removing 30% of the traffic, which is our goal, and getting those people into transit, it'll make the travel times more reliable for those trying to go to the resorts, but also help all the residents that live at the mouth of the canyon, or near the mouth of the canyon. Next slide, please. I think everybody's aware we had 5 alternatives that we analyzed in depth. We actually looked at 124 separate alternatives over the course of the project, and 5 alternatives went into the draft EIS. So that was enhanced bus with no widening in the canyon, enhanced bus with peak period shoulder lanes, which is essentially a bus-only lane in the canyon, a gondola from the mouth of the canyon, a gondola from about 3/4 of a mile north west of the canyon, which unfortunately kind of got dubbed Lakai. But I think it's important to note that this doesn't leave from the red brick driveway with swans, right? It's coming off North Little Cottonwood Road. And then a cog rail from that same location. Okay. So next slide, please.
Can you define cog rail for me, please?
Sure. It's very similar if you looked at it to a standard light rail system. But functionally, it's a little bit different in that it has a rack and pinion system that engages with a third center rail to allow it to climb steeper grades. Because light rail's really only good to about 7 to 8% grades, and there's numerous areas that are steeper than that. It's actually fine going up. Coming down's the problem. Part of the 14,000 comments we got on the draft EIS, these are the major themes. I think the two that surprised me were support for tolling. UDOT has proposed tolling in other locations to not exactly terrific fanfare, but also support for a phased alternative. And that's really in the final alternative or the final EIS. That phasing came from the public comment period. Now, we just closed the final comment period on October 17th, and we got another 13,400 comments. We have not read all of those, as you can imagine, in 2 short weeks. We'll pick it up, I'm sorry. Interestingly, though, they are available for public review. We released them all on Monday. Generally, everybody took about 1,000 comments, and we redacted all personal information and vulgar words, just to make sure it was G-rated. So all of the comments are available to review today, but nobody on the project team has reviewed all of them, if that makes sense. Next slide, please. Next slide, if there's any questions about where the bus stops are located. One more, please. So as everybody's aware, in the final EIS, UDOT identified gondola alternative B as the preferred alternative. And the reason behind this is really fourfold. Obviously, this is the one we feel that meets the mobility component of the purpose and need, the reliability component the best of the purpose and need because it functions in a separate alignment. So it's not prone to slide-offs, crashes, slow-moving vehicles. So it's pretty consistent in getting you to your destination on time, which is important. The other component, of course, is this is an environmental impact study. So we reviewed all of the environmental impacts associated with the gondola. We do recognize that it will be a significant change in the viewshed, right? There's no doubt about it. A lot of people have brought this up. The addition of 22 towers will make the canyon look different. But this was a holistic look at all of the environmental impacts associated with with all of the 5 action alternatives and the no action alternative. The other part of that is phasing, and I'll talk more about phasing in a second, but I think it's important to note that UDOT has not identified the funding, whether it be federal, state, and/or private, for the current $550 million price tag for the gondola. And I think it's important to note that 550 also includes snow sheds, the widening of Wasatch, tolling, and the mobility hubs that are actually common to all of the alternatives. So the gondola represents about 335 of the 550 million, with the remaining money being commonalities to all 5 action alternatives. Next slide, please. Quick overview of the gondola. Again, I don't want to spend more than a minute on this, but we have a $550 million capital cost with a winter operation and maintenance cost of $4 million per year. These costs actually came down from the draft EIS because we relocated all of the parking to the Lakai base station, which saved about $42 million in capital cost and $3.6 million in ongoing annual cost. And under this alternative, a cabin would arrive every 2 minutes and would hold 35 people. A bus holds 42 people. So just for size comparison, roughly the same size, but a little bit higher frequency.
Does that include skis and all the paraphernalia they might be bringing to do stuff up there?
So that does include to bring that gear inside the cabin with you.
Okay.
Correct. Next slide, please. Oh, sorry, one more, and you don't have to go back. Total travel time for this alternative is 55 minutes. But if you look kind of on the right in the center, that includes the total travel time from the 7-Eleven at the mouth of Big Cottonwood. So it's 6 minutes to drive to the base station, 12 minutes to park, and then walk over to the gondola, wait for that next cabin, and then 27 minutes up to Snowbird and 10 more minutes to Alta. So it is 37 minutes in the gondola. Interestingly, that 55 minutes is very similar to the 54-minute travel time in the enhanced bus. So they're essentially the same. It's the difference of making the light at Wasatch and Bengal or not, right? So very similar travel times. And then if we can go 2 slides forward, please. So we know visual impacts are a huge consideration for many users. So we did do additional, we called them key observational points. I think the probably accurate term is artistic renderings for those of you that aren't following NEPA of what this might look like in the canyon. So we did about a half dozen additional of these so that the public could better understand and UDOT as decision makers could understand the impacts to the view shed in the canyon. Again, big benefits of the gondola: travel time reliability, no getting caught behind a slide off or a slow moving vehicle. Obviously, public input was part of this. You've probably heard me say many times or read it in an article or wherever that the NEPA process is not a vote, but its purpose is really to make sure that we leave no stone unturned in our analysis. We look at every possible alternative. We make sure that our analysis is both thorough and correct. And really, it gives the public an opportunity to make sure that, again, we didn't leave any stone unturned, right? That's the purpose there. The other important thing to note is that if you look at the life cycle cost, the gondola actually has the lowest overall 30-year cost. So it's right in the middle for the capital cost, but because it's O&M, or operation and maintenance cost, yearly is lower, the overall life cycle cost is lower. Next slide, please.
Can I ask a question on that, Mr. Chair? So why is it so much cheaper to run a gondola? Is it because buses themselves are expensive, or bus drivers, or what is, that surprises me.
B, bus drivers. So we anticipate that there would need to be 17 employees per shift for the gondola. The bus is estimated at more than 50, drivers alone, not including mechanics and supervisors. So it's literally just 12 hours a day times 140 days a year times 30 years is that big delta. Again, here's some additional views. We heard a lot of comments from the Salt Lake Climbers Alliance, and we recognize that this is a highly sought after recreation opportunity. So we went to the base of these historic climbing routes and took photos to see what the view shed for the climbers would look like. Again, so we could better understand it and we could better represent it to the community. Next slide, please. So phased implementation. Like I said, we don't have the money today. We don't have the $550 million. We have a little bit of money from SB 277 left. There is the CC TIF that was generated 2 years ago that actually requires legislative action to use it. But we also recognize that we have a problem today, right? I don't know what the weather is going to be on December 26th or December 23rd this year, because that's a Friday, I believe. But I bet there's canyon traffic, whether it's snowing or not, right? That's a big ski day. So recognizing that we need to do something today, not only for the skier traffic, but the residents of Alta, the residents of Cottonwood Heights, and the residents of Sandy who literally can't get out of their streets some days. We're looking at a smaller, more scalable solution that we can implement more quickly to help offset these problems for both the community as skiers, but also other canyon users and residents. And that's really improving and increasing bus service, providing more parking for the users of that bus service, and also some incentivization to use the bus service. And that would come in the form of tolling for Upper Canyon only visitors. And then as we move down, we would look to the widening of Wasatch, implementing roadside parking restrictions and building snow sheds, and ultimately the gondola as funds become available. So next slide. I got 4 minutes left. So I'm going to go over the subcomponents really quickly, and then I'll give you where we're at today and where we think we're going. So again, the commonalities between all 5 of the alternatives, one of which is tolling, which, as I mentioned, UDOT has always had within the document. I found it surprising that there was a breaking news story about UDOT was proposing a toll in the canyon. I was like, we've actually always been talking about that. But I'm actually thankful for it because it brought it to the attention of everybody. So that was a really good opportunity. We do anticipate that tolls will be variable based on date and basically acceptance of transit. So we anticipate that it'll be $25 to $30 to go above Snowbird Entry 1, which is all reserved parking at this point. So it is, yeah. So this is only during roughly those 50 days a year, though, from 7 a.m. to 10 a.m. in the morning, right? So overall, a very small amount of the year, but absolutely during those peak travel times. And transit will be a low-cost viable solution should you want to travel in those travel times. We also anticipate that we would have to implement a very similar tolling strategy in Big Cottonwood at the same time, because otherwise we would just shift the problem. Transit parking, like I said, you can increase transit, but if there's nowhere for people to access that transit, it doesn't work. We have been working with UTA to look at what options of Valley bus service could service these gravel pit locations. But there's a lot of people that are coming from Park City that there's no viable transit to get there, right? These people are going to drive their cars, right? There's just, depending on where you live. So we want to provide the option for Valley Transit to service the mobility hubs and this ski bus service, but also we recognize we need parking. Wasatch Boulevard is actually a separate problem. This is a PM peak commuter problem. This isn't a skier traffic problem. The total volume of cars on a Saturday morning is minimal compared to what it is on a Tuesday at 5 p.m. And everybody thinks Wasatch improvements are associated with ski traffic. They're absolutely driven by commuter traffic. We're also proposing snow sheds at 2 locations. 3 locations, 2 sheds, let me clarify. So that is White Pine Chutes, and Little Pine. If you're familiar with the canyon, these are kind of the frequent repeaters for the avalanche crew. We put 163 artillery shells into these 3 shots per year. So they represent a large amount of the closure time and a large amount of the risk in the canyon. By putting the snow sheds in, we expect that we'll be able to reduce the 20-year average closure time from 56 hours down to 10 hours. An 80% reduction in canyon closures. And that's when the neighborhoods really feel it, and commute times go from 20 minutes to 4 hours regularly. So that's a major concern. We're also looking at improving 4 trailheads, so White Pine, Lisa Falls, and a new one called The Bridge. So if you're familiar with what they did at the Forest Service, he's sitting right here, Lance and crew did at the Grit Mill parking lot, think paved parking areas, striped stalls, toilets, water quality buffers, and this is really important to minimize erosion and noxious weeds in the canyon to get people off that shoulder, and therefore also creating spider trails. Moving forward, like I said, we just completed our 45-day comment period. We got 13,000 comments. We are working through them. Our schedule, we said that we were hoping for the winter of 22-23. In my brain, that's the way ski seasons work, right? Because if you say winter 22, you're like, well, are you talking about January of 2022 or December of 2022? So we went with the ski season naming nomenclature and said winter 22-23. We based that estimate on 8,500 comments. We got a lot more than 8,500 comments. At this point, we don't know what we don't know, if that makes sense, because we just haven't had a chance. We do anticipate that we'll have to do some amount of additional engineering and analysis. We just don't know the scope of that yet. But optimistically, we'll stay on track for that, but I would just like to put a little caveat on that we got a lot more comments than we thought. So that is 21 minutes.
Thanks, Josh. Appreciate it. Questions?
I just have a curiosity question, and I've always wondered this. Is the traffic that much worse in Little Cottonwood than Big Cottonwood right now? Because I feel like it's bad in both, but why was it Little Cottonwood that was selected?
So the traffic in both is bad. I don't disagree with that, right? Last year we had record-setting skier days, and it didn't snow for 7 weeks in the middle of the winter, right? If you all remember, from about the second week of January through February, it just didn't snow. The reason Little Cottonwood was prioritized is the Transportation Commission basically prioritized it. And they said, focus on Little Cottonwood, and that is the manageable chunk to look at first. So that was prioritized through our Transportation Commission.
They do have more closures because of the avalanches than Big Cottonwood, or am I wrong there?
Sorry, was the question, do we have more?
They have more closures because of the avalanche in Little Cottonwood than Big Cottonwood.
They do. Little Cottonwood has far more avalanche closures. Big Cottonwood does have avalanche closures. I don't know if you remember when Argenta hit the road in the early 80s. If anybody's seen those photos, there's 20 feet of snow on the road, right? And mature trees snapped like toothpicks. But the sheer number of paths in Little Cottonwood is much higher.
So for people who are working at the resorts, who are doing relatively low-wage jobs, the people who are cleaning the rooms, who are working the restaurants, are we going to be requiring them to use this transit?
So we would not require them to use that transit. We wouldn't require, we can't actually require any specific group. I mean, that would be problematic.
Would we be offering them waivers for tolls if they have to commute during those tolled hours?
So that's one of the things that we need to look at, and it's discussed in the document that there may be a toll waiver for residents. Because if you live up there and you're working a night shift and Friday night, you want to come home, not everybody that lives in the canyon is high wage, right? So we need to look at delivery vehicles, residents, and employees, and make sure there's a fair and equitable way for them to get home or get to their jobs.
Second, I can't take my dog up in this because it's valuable watershed. I can't imagine that friction on something that probably requires oil-based products to maintain its flow isn't going to have some sort of shedding effect into our rapidly dwindling watershed. How do we protect that? What's the plan on being proactive?
So you're talking about specifically?
I'm imagining if we're going along cables, you have to grease those. I mean, I'm not an engineer. Someone else tag in here, but the only way I've ever seen anything like this work is some sort of oil-based lubrication that prevents friction on those cables, and that is known to rub off and to fall into the water source. I'd rather have dog poop than oil-based things, honestly.
No, that's a good point, right? Because generally anything that's moving needs some sort of, less friction means less energy. So that's a good question. Honestly, I do need to look into that. We saw that comment, and I never thought about greasing, the wheels on top of the towers, or because there's I don't know the answer to this. I'm going to preface that, and I can follow up with you. But that is generally only at the tower locations that would need that lubricant, but I'm assuming they have some sort of environmentally based.
Since we all need water, I would really love it if we had more than assumption at some point. I understand they don't have it now, but yeah, I'd really love concrete answers to that.
Yes.
Councilor Pui?
Just the only thing that I have questions about, obviously there is a PR angle to this, and obviously for what I heard and driving in the area and seeing the banners and whatnot, and just that is aside to my question. But if this were to happen, and so those towers, and I saw the photos, those towers seem to be coming from next to trees or next to nature. But those towers are going to most likely need some sort of servicing once in a while, or checking, or whatever engineers need to come up and look, or whatever it is. But so that means that there are going to be some sort of areas where a truck needs to stop nearby, and someone needs to walk to those columns, and and I'm sure that there's extra environmental impacts, at least near the sides of the columns of these pillars. And I wonder if all of that, I'm sure that has been thought out, but also, and I guess this is no more much of a question more than a comment, things that I'm just popping in my head, but also related to environmental emergency situations, not only from those passengers, but earthquake or things like that, how do we handle, and again, someone has figured this out in other parts of the world and the country, but how do we service a gondola that is in the middle of the trees? Do we need to create paths for this? And so that adds more environmental footprint than originally thought out. So I just want to make sure that we are thinking about these things, and I'm sure that we are, but I just wanted to leave it out there.
Yeah, and I can answer all of those questions. The short answer is this gondola system that's being proposed is very different than what you may be familiar with, right? A lot of people are familiar with Red Pine at the canyons, right? Or maybe you've been to Telluride for the Blues Fest or the Jazz Fest and ridden the system there. Those are 1S systems, single cable. This would be a 3S system. So if you've been to Whistler and ridden the peak-to-peak gondola, that system has a 1.8 mile span between towers and is 1,400 feet off the ground. Obviously, evacuations can't happen. So for tower maintenance, you would actually access from the cabin itself. So we actually anticipate that many of the towers would be constructed via helicopter. And this is all discussed within the document. But each tower is discussed if it has close proximity to the existing road or an existing pullout, we utilize that for just ground-based crane access. But most of the towers are helicopter access construction, meaning no additional roads to the base. And when it comes to emergency situations, these have all been thought of, right? We as UDOT design bridges to handle earthquakes all the time. This is a very similar design constraint. Again, this is very much within our wheelhouse.
A couple questions on the transportation side. I'm always concerned when we add an extra avenue or an extra lane, we don't actually decrease the traffic, we actually increase the traffic. And I know that tolling should be able to, would be offsetting that traffic that goes up there. But we're also just talking about short windows in the morning hours and 50 days a year. Is it gondola running 365 days a year?
So we anticipate that it will run for the full duration of the winter, basically 7A to 7P. But we also analyze the impacts of it running in the summer as well, and sort of said, well, this is what it would cost, and these would be the impacts of summer, although that's not needed to solve our purpose and need.
Right.
We recognize, because it's a large capital investment, that there may be a desire to run it in the summer as well.
Right, because we have a very large capital for very few days. Because I ski up in Alta, but I go up on Monday morning, and it doesn't take me very long to get up there. So I don't need an enhanced gondola or bus, and I take the bus or I drive, depending on what I need to, when I need to get back home. But I rarely ski on Fridays and Saturdays and Sundays.
Those are the
because
only
those are
3
bad
days I
days,
get to.
right? Those are the only days that we really need this extra gondola. And I also am concerned that having this extra gondola doesn't really reduce the traffic, because if you have a ski pass, you already probably have a free transit. You have a probably get the free. You probably get a free gondola pass, because my pass gives me a free bus ride right now.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, I load 5 people up in my truck, if I had a truck, right? And I pay $5. I'm going to park. So I'm worried that the gondola is not going to actually reduce the traffic. It's going to increase the traffic on both on the road, on Wasatch, and the parking, and that concerns me at that price tag that I'm paying for it. And if to get up to Alton Snowbird, I'm privileged to go up to ski, but if I want to go to White Pine or want to hike, you know, that extra traffic isn't solving my problem, and that's my concerns. Along with it, it is my watershed. It is our watershed, and that is even probably my biggest concern across the board, of not increasing the traffic up there, but actually decreasing the number of vehicles up there. And I'm not sure if this is going to actually decrease the number of vehicles. That's my limited discussion. But go ahead. If I don't know if you had a.
No, just like you mean the extra lane wouldn't decrease, but wouldn't the toll persuade people not to?
Possibly not. It may decrease some. It may actually increase people, because they'll just go together. But there also you could actually increase the number of users up in there. The traffic up there could also be impacted.
I guess it depends to me. Depends to me how pricey that toll is. You know, and that, I think that makes a difference. But I know that people that ski in generally or partake of winter sports are, not everybody, but many of them have a comfort as far as money goes.
And then the flex, so it would just run probably 7 to 7, and then the hours would extend it, because skiers want to get up there before 7, and some want to get will stay up late.
Mm-hmm.
But right now it's 7 to 7 is the proposal.
That's what we analyze, because those are the peak hours.
Yeah, those are the peak hours.
Right. I mean, obviously there's workers that, you know, ski patrollers, and then there's, you know, servers at the restaurants at night that show up later but also leave significantly later. But we don't see the traffic congestion at that time. So again, it's really kind of balancing the cost to run the system versus what the anticipated users are during those hours.
I mean, I love the idea that we get up to the mountain easier and more efficiently. I'm just hesitant over the price tag of something of this level, when we can flex buses when we need to. I know that's difficult because it's hard for UTA to do flex buses, but when we're only talking 3 days a weekend for a number of weekends, I see that. Personally, I would spend it somewhere else. But any other questions?
Yeah, I mean, just a little quick comment. Obviously, we don't have any authority over this project, but I wonder if the Salt Lake City owns any of the properties, because Salt Lake City owns a lot of canyon lands, or we own quite a bit of property, watershed property in the canyon. So I wonder if there is any connections.
Well, we just own the water. Well, we don't own the water. We borrow the water to drink.
Yeah, but we do own some land outside our jurisdiction. So I was just wondering.
Interestingly, I believe you do own what is commonly referred to as, the county salt shed. So just north of the proper Lakai entrance, the county runs a salt shed, which I believe is actually Salt Lake City property, that we would be building an access road up to the gravel pit or the gondola base station parking lot. So there may be property impacted, but it's currently covered in salt, which is not the best thing for water quality, I might add.
All right. Thank you very much. We hit our time on the mark. That was beautiful. Appreciate that very much, and love the presentation and the briefing. Thank you very much, Josh.
Thank you.
Anna. Thank you. Council, moving on to item number 4, Draft Transportation Master Plan Midpoint Check-In. We have our transportation gurus here. Briefing with Ben, we have John and Joe to give us the update.
I think we also have a couple consultants joining virtually in case there are questions.
Thanks.
I'll give a quick intro. The briefing today is a midpoint check-in on updating the city's transportation master plan. The last version was adopted by the council in 1996, so a quarter century ago.
What? Don't say that. Like last week.
The high-level transportation policies of the plan affect everything the city does related to transportation. So it's difficult to keep up with the evolving technology changes in transportation, which is one of the things the plan hopes to address. You can think of the transportation plan as the overall umbrella under which other plans, studies, capital improvement projects all fit. So the transit master plan, the bicycle and pedestrian master plan, CIP projects that come to the council every year. All of those would be impacted by the policies the council adopts in this updated version. The plan does not make specific project recommendations, though. Those belong in other plans and studies, like the Sugarhouse Local Link update, which will be coming to the council soon. There are several policy questions for the council's consideration in the staff report. These were pulled together by staff based on council funding discussions related to transportation earlier this year. So the Livable Streets program, the annual budget, traffic calming, as well as CIP. It would be helpful today if the council has policy feedback on the overall direction of the plan, the big problems it sees in the city, the values which are guiding the plan, as well as the areas of focus. When the draft plan is complete, it'll come back to the council for a follow-up briefing, a public hearing, and then ultimately an adoption vote. This is going to be next year. And that's it for me. I'll turn it over to John and Joe, who have a presentation.
Thanks, Ben. I'm going to send it right over to Joe, who is actually going to run the presentation.
Thanks for having us out to talk transportation policy. And we'll get into it. Next slide. So we got a great introduction there, but just go over really quickly what it is, what it isn't, a quick run through of the engagement that we've done so far, and then get into the policy topics that we are going to try and tackle. So what the plan is a guidebook for how we utilize our right-of-way system and how we move things around. We want this to ensure that we express our values in every transportation project that we do, And so this will be a way to do that. And then a recipe for, taking advantage of the changing future of transportation technology. What it isn't, most transportation master plans regionally are essentially a laundry list of transportation projects. This is not that. It likely will have no specific project recommendations. It's a policy document. It is very much not anti-car. It just doesn't have a whole lot to say about cars. And then, we really made an effort to have this be a bottom-up, citizen-driven document, and we'll get more into that. Next slide, please. So a little background. And one more, sorry. This is an update of the still, I think, really actually progressive for its time and great 1996 plan. But a lot has changed since then. We wanted a more community-driven plan. This image on the slide is from that 96 plan, and it kind of gets to the zeitgeist that we're trying to get away from. It's, policy-focused, and like I said, it's about people rather than any particular vehicle they may have chosen. Next slide. So one of the first things we did is form a community advisory committee. These are 9 paid positions. All of these people live and either work and or go to school in Salt Lake City. We had almost 100 applications, which were reviewed by a really extensive committee that I wasn't on. But these folks have shaped all of the subsequent engagement. They've reviewed or had direct input on every stage of the process. And then we've also just gotten together and met, walked around, talked a lot about it. So they have been really invaluable. And really just an incredible way to sort of give us access to networks and communities that we otherwise, have struggled to reach. So really a great way of working in it, and I would love to continue to do it as much as we can. This is a rough timeline, showing that right now we've done the bulk of our, next slide, thank you. Engagement work, and we are now kind of drafting policy, which means it's a great time to solicit input and make sure that we're reflecting what's important to you. So next slide. First round of engagement was just about what people value in their transportation networks. Did not touch on any kind of transportation policy or tool or infrastructure feature. We really just asked people what they care about. What we heard is that sustainability, reliability, safety and health, affordability, and equity are what people care about. And then we sort of reweighted for those demographics that we didn't hear from as well. And if we reflect what those folks said they cared about, equitable access to opportunity came up as well. So everything subsequently in the plan is an attempt to reflect all of that stuff. Second round of engagement, next slide please, was bringing actual transportation kind of policy ideas out into the public. This involved an online survey and mapping exercise as well as going out into the public. I think most of our engagement in person was on the west side. We did a little bit downtown as well. But we really are trying to focus on hitting those areas that we've struggled to hit in the past, and that's west side, languages other than English, and the youth specifically. Next slide, please. So there's a list of some of the places that we went. We had a lot of really great, lengthy conversations in person. It was a great, exercise. We went to some really cool places that I never would have gone. Concurrently with this, we did some internal work with other city departments and divisions, what we've kind of been calling city therapy. Just to make sure that as we deliver infrastructure projects, we're doing it, as seamlessly with our friends throughout the city, to just cut down on that, how often we're ripping up the street and making sure that we're being as respectful of the taxpayer's dollar as we possibly can. And then we did a walking workshop with the advisory committee that was focused specifically on the east-west divide. And that was a really impactful and powerful exercise. Next slide. So what we're hoping to get into policy meat-wise are these topics, and I'll go over each one specifically, but it's equity, active transportation and safety, curb space management, emerging technology, sustainability, the east-west divide specifically, and then land use integration. Next slide. So I think equity is something that, it's a really broad topic, and so I think you have to be really intentional about what you mean when you say equity. And from this perspective, we're just, really focusing on the idea that not everybody in our city has access to the same transportation options or is impacted by transportation infrastructure in the same way. And so we don't want to deliver the same product to every area or every person. We want to assess what's there and deliver people what they actually need. We, really want to be intentional in noting that a lot of, the inequity that exists throughout the city is the result of transportation projects, specifically freeway and heavy rail projects. And so it's incumbent on us as transportation professionals to help redress that. And then, accessibility for all abilities and safety for everybody who wants to get around however they can or do is incredibly important. And then we just want to continue to learn from and proactively engage as best we can and make sure we're hearing from as diverse, and represented or underrepresented groups as we can. Next slide. Active transportation and safety. We have an incredible transit and pedestrian bicycle plan, and we want to build on those. We want to make sure that it's areas of high collisions that we're focusing on. There seems to be sort of I don't know if you want to call it political momentum towards, things being safer and more comfortable rather than quick to get around. That's something we really want to take advantage of because it makes things safer and it also makes spaces better to be in. And so we are just working towards, improving that. Emerging technology, I think, as sort of the...
Next slide, please.
Oh, next slide. Thanks, John. As sort of the mobile phone assisted scooters came to our city and cities, worldwide, that was sort of a wake up call for, I think, cities across the globe that, disruptive technology is going to be something that impacts our transportation system. And so we just want to make sure that we have some sort of framework to take as best advantage of that as we possibly can, and also just, be set up to mitigate any negative impacts that it might accompany it. Next slide. Curb space management is, it sounds incredibly boring, but I think it's a really important topic. Highest and best use of our curb space is basically but a huge part of what defines the viability, both economic and vibrancy of a space. And so getting that mix, especially somewhere like downtown where there's high competition for the space on the curb, is really something that can lead to, the city being what we want it to be or not. So, just making sure that we're taking into consideration economic considerations, but also the mix to make the character of the city what we want it to be. Next slide. Obviously, transportation has a lot to say about air quality, and so, that's kind of our primary sustainability topic. Most of that we are looking at through making shifts to modes other than cars easier, more comfortable, more affordable, and more competitive from a time perspective. There's also some considerations for things like stormwater. We haven't built a lot of new roads in Salt Lake City. That may change as we expand westward. We just want to make sure that, being that close to the lake, we want our stormwater runoff to be, dealt with as well as we can. And then there's some things like, more sustainable materials. Blacktop tends to attract a lot of heat. Just looking at where we can be a little more proactive there. Next slide, please. So a big part of this is the east-west divide. I think probably everyone in the city knows that when you get stuck behind a train, it is a huge inconvenience, to say the least. And, I think it's also just a concrete reminder, or literal concrete reminder, that there are two halves of the city, and that, there is a real physical, temporal mobility divide. And so we need to, address that. This is something that transportation intends to explore in a lot more detail after this plan. We've sought federal funding to do this in a way more serious way. But this is just kind of looking at a survey of what could we do from, anything with paint up to, that major infrastructure investment. Next slide, please. Obviously, we think about the right-of-way almost exclusively, and it seems like everything to us, but if you live in the city, that's not the case. It's the interface between the land use and the transportation infrastructure that really makes a livable city. So, just working with our friends in planning and throughout the city to make sure that we're serving the land use that we want to see in the city, and also that the land use is, working well with the transportation. So yeah, after that, next slide, there's a few more topics that we either want to consider or been asked to consider outside of those buckets. One is this partnership and process of just making, our part of the city work better with everybody else that works in the roadway. I think we do somewhat well, but there's obviously room for improvement. So just working with our friends in utilities and streets and engineering as well as planning to kind of develop a process that's more holistic in terms of infrastructure delivery. Alleyways seem to be something that is, kind of ripe for discussion. There's about 80 miles of alleys in the city. Not a lot of that is maybe really ready for mobility, right? It's not very connected. So kind of identifying what has mobility potential, but then also looking at, how can we make best use of those maybe more stub or shorter alleyways. There's a lot of potential there for, non-mobility uses. And then I think, maybe what we would like to hear most from this body is we really feel like what we will measure in this plan is what we'll build towards. And so what metrics can we tack on to this plan that we can, really actually achieve? But also, what should we be measuring? What should we be working towards? And, we have some ideas there, but we'd love your input on that or anything else that we want to talk about. So I think that, next slide, will get us through this presentation, and we'd be happy to have any discussion.
Thank you, Joe. Questions?
Hi, thanks. So I truly, Joe, I want to thank you for bringing up one of my biggest, not biggest, but one of my concerns is how this plan will integrate working with other city departments as a policy, right? Not just as like a goal but really that is one of the policies that before anything is done in these projects is this, as I appreciate how Ben put it, sort of the umbrella over which everything else will kind of fall under. We saw this in 9th Central and it worked, and I want to continue seeing this as a goal of that we're looking at truly cooperating with each of the different departments within our city as we're looking at different transit projects. So it's a very big policy topic for me, and I'm glad that you met with all the city people, and now we just have to figure out what language that looks like as we put that in the policy.
Yeah, it's been really, really awesome.
Any other questions or comments there?
I do.
Okay,
more.
go ahead.
Sorry. The other thing I was thinking about as I was listening to this presentation is, and because we just got back from Revolution, and so of course, like things are in my brain, right? Our TODs and HTRZs, and how we can create an overarching policy that may help us also look at our policies as we're looking at TODs and or HTRZs, because the HTRZs I think are going to be coming up. We haven't done one yet, but it's going to be there, and I think it's important that, again, going back to integrating these sort of overarching policies through all of our departments, I think that we have an opportunity here to have a really base foundation as we're looking at also the other side of this, right? The housing component that is inevitable as we're kind of looking at how transportation goes, right? And so I don't know what that looks like, but it's something that I'd be really interested in brainstorming with and kind of seeing how does one policy play into another policy and or other things that are coming down the pipeline. As we know, transportation is integral in everything that we do within a city, right? And that includes housing. So again, I don't know what that looks like and how that plays together, but it feels like it does.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, you have to have great transit to make a TOD, but great transit doesn't make a TOD. And so making sure that the ability to create that sort of thing that extends beyond, you know, any particular staff turnover, I think is incredibly important.
Chair? Yeah, it's something that just popped in my head very quickly, and I know this is more of a out loud comment than a question. But you mentioned that we have two halves of the city, right? And the biggest chunk of my district is in that half, and I cannot tell you enough about how much trains, especially, are the biggest problem there. That causes the most disturbance. Obviously, freeways are part of the problem as well. But when we're talking about trains, it feels to me that government, and I'm new at this, and I'm part of government, so I'm sort of also blaming myself to this, but we try to come up with plans, but we know what the solution is already, right? That the solution is removing the crossings or minimizing how much people are stopped in those crossings. So we know what the answer is. We know that we need to figure out a way of removing them. Now, we talk about how much those cost and how complicated it is. And yes, I understand that there is a lot of barriers and we cannot afford that ourselves, unfortunately. So I just want to make sure that we understand that we don't deprioritize our funding sources that might be from the federal level, for example. There is ways that, the federal infrastructure bill put some money aside for this, for train crossings, and I don't know if we need to. I will tell you that probably 10 out of 10 people on the west side will tell you, yes, fix this. So we don't know. I don't think that we need a lot of questionnaires and a lot of public input about how bad these crossings are. These crossings are the biggest offender, and finding a solution for this is ultimate urgency. So applying for these grants is important to me, and hopefully we apply for them. And I know that they're complicated to apply, and I'm sure that there is stacks of paper. But I don't know if we're waiting to apply because of these plans. This transportation plan is being worked out, and I don't want us to miss, applying and working on those grants.
Yeah, I really appreciate you bringing that up, Councilmember Pui. Our hope is that, originally we'd get the RAISE grant, which would have for the east-west connectivity. We didn't get that. We applied again. I appreciate council's support on this for there's a Reconnecting Communities grant, which is a lot more narrow in scope, and we feel like we really match up well with that. That was submitted last month. And that would give us the ability to start working into to dive right into the planning and design and environmental for basically every crossing, as well as exploring, the really big ideas like the train trench. And for this round, UTA showed up with as an even stronger partner with some funding, additional funding as well. They're really interested in the Second South crossing. That really impacts a lot of the things that they're trying to do. It's right by their headquarters and right by the central station. And the value, if we can get that grant, is for the planning and design work, is then subsequent grants. We're already they've already shown a commitment to the idea and the concept, And so we think that that increases our odds for getting the capital funding to actually build it down the line. And so, yeah, we'll have to work up some contingency plans if we don't get that grant. Perhaps we just use what we would have used as match and partner with local partners to just move ahead with some of the design and planning, and then just start applying for individual projects in some of these grants. But there are some really exciting opportunities with the bipartisan infrastructure law, with the reconnecting communities and the railroad elimination program grant and others. So we're absolutely keeping a very close eye on every opportunity, and there, any other local funding opportunities as well. I just want you to know we hear you, and we are and will continue to do everything we can to work on this issue.
Yeah, thank you, and thank you, and I will love an update on, whatever other grants that you're applying or looking into related to trains. And it's just my community really wants the hope that is the light at the end of the train tunnel. So I think it will be very helpful to say, yeah, the city is working on this and this and this, and there is a possibility on that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilman Peter.
Similar to that, I feel like we have a lot of really proactive opportunities coming up, particularly in the Northwest Quadrant with the port kind of coming through. And that ranges everywhere from like proactive street design to disincentivize street racing, all the way through to the design standards. They want to make it, like this gateway at 72 into the city, and like we could really have some exciting design standards with partners who bring funding to the table for it. And so I'm really hoping that the train crossings, absolutely. We're already a year behind what our first promise was for when we're moving that rail yard, but we're clinging to hope that it's going to move. But beyond that, like I really would like to see us be proactive about, especially what these new streetscapes, what the new functionality of the streets, if we're going to honestly have the North Point small area plan incentivize some connectivity from the river to the lake, even though it's going to be mostly industrial, how do we create roads that accommodate 18-wheelers, but also allow for bikers to enjoy it in with reasonable comfort and safety, right? So I really would love to see that forward-looking kind of, and I'd like to get us to get away in the Northwest Quadrant in particular from having to always have the traditional curbs, but really focus on that water conservation like you all were talking about out there. It's going to become, increasingly important.
Yeah, and a lot of what we've heard is that out there in the more industrial, western portions, a big problem that industry is having is keeping employees because it's so hard to get to. And so I think just like you said, the tractor trailers, but also with comfortable and affordable ways for actual people to get around is paramount for sure.
Councilman Fowler.
Thank you. Something else I was just thinking about, again, sort of from a higher level policy idea is, and I want to thank Ben for the staff report and the suggestions of the policy questions, is something that was brought up earlier of the traffic calming, the Livable Streets program, all of that. One of the things I noticed during the budget this year was how important to each of us livable streets, complete streets, traffic calming was. And I felt like we see requests or any one of us get an idea in our brain and move money from one place to another and whatever. But we see requests from CIP, we see requests from just within the budget themselves. One of the things I'm wondering from, again, this sort of overarching policy is how do we streamline that so that we can see where the funding is, where it's going, and not all, I felt like during the budget we had $500,000 here for this thing, and then we did another bunch of money over on this side for this other thing that was kind of the same thing, and I I know I'm just sort of throwing things at the wall, but it seems like if we're doing an overarching policy with this plan, then that I would like a little section in there about funding sources and where it's coming from or what to look at. And I know I'm being very vague, but it just kind of popped into my head of like not wanting to reinvent the wheel, right? No pun intended. But making sure that we're all on the same track. I'm just going to keep going with these, you know? Does that sort of make sense what I'm saying? Ben might be able to translate Fowler.
No, that makes a lot of sense. And this is something that I've been thinking about a lot ever since I started. And I feel like we're making a lot of progress towards it. But we're not there yet. But the vision that I keep kind of poking at and is that I love what you're saying is we need to have that pipeline with a multi-year lookout, right? So that and even some of the projects beyond what's already funded, so that you can probably see kind of the bigger picture better. But my goal, and I talk about this a lot with our staff, is and in collaboration with engineering as well, that is to have a pipeline stuffed full of projects that make all of you excited, and then leave it up to you to figure out how to, get them funded and into the pipeline. But our job is to have them ready and queued up for you to choose from, and there's no doubt that we can do better at that, and we're having a lot of conversations about how we can do that, and getting that kind of enshrined in this plan, I think would be really great.
I just wanted to make a plug for a capital facilities plan, like a 5-year CIP for all of the different funding needs the city has. That's one of the benefits of having that tool, is you are able to better see the alignment of your policy goals.
About to give you a hug. Thank you.
We're going to get there. But matching our funding sources with the council's policy goals, that is the mechanism where it all comes together.
Awesome. Thank you. Perfect.
We hear you. I know.
Just a couple comments. First, I like that when you just said auto, and I'm just saying that I'm glad we have a transportation plan that is looking at a policy plan that is not car centric, and that's beautiful, because we got to get away from that thought process. And I'm looking at your slide with the policy topics, and I think they're right on. I had some different words. You mentioned the east-west connection, calming, accessibility. I'm thinking also, I'm not sure if it's part of a policy for transportation, but just increased public transportation usage or availability. Maybe it goes back to the comment about the TODs or TOCs on that area. So that's taking care of the people. And then the sustainability side of the house, taking care of, our planet, which is also taking care of the people. So when you look at the metrics, I think Ben's got a list of metrics there on item number 2 of his questions. I think those are wonderful things to measure. I'm not sure if you can measure all of those. There might be some that are just too difficult to measure quantitatively. But, the reduced fatalities, shorter time lanes, reduced train, person, whatever you call it, conflict, all that would be some things that we could really reduce. And I would really appreciate making sure that we take a look at that. On a final note, we came back from the rail revolution. We all probably were absorbed with so many good ideas, and I kind of just mentioned them a few earlier. And I've asked the staff to see if we can have some small group meetings and kind of brain dump what we came up, what we learned, and kind of give you an idea of some of the thoughts that we came about before we forget them, because there's a lot of good stuff there. So with that, any other questions? Because we're almost right on town now. Did we give you enough for to work on?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having us.
Oh, thank you. This is awesome. Appreciate it.
Appreciate it.
Council, we're moving on to item number 6. The Salt Lake City International Airport Master Plan follow-up. Sam was on the screen, and I think I saw Brady somewhere. Brady's on the... I thought I saw Brady on the screen somewhere.
I'm on.
Okay. Great. It's all yours, Sam.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The airport master plan is back on the council work session agenda to get council's review on two major points being added as proposed amendments to the plan to clarify and make more available a couple of themes that emerged during your discussions on the topic of the master plan. The points would be included in the plan document, probably as an appendix. If the council is comfortable with the proposed changes, the formal meeting motion sheet will look basically just like the draft that should be in front of you at your places in the CAL. The points address carbon reduction, as well as improved internal accessibility during the ongoing airport construction. With that, Mr. Chair, I can read all of the words if you like, or turn it over to the airport. I don't know if they have feedback.
Okay, I'll let Brady say a few words. And this was just going to be a quick, short 10 minutes discussion because of the motion that you sent out to us, Sam. So Brady, do you have any additional words?
No, I would just look forward to getting the motion passed, and then what we can do is what I intend to do is talk to our master plan team. We have mobilized, and based on the comments here, we'll start working on an appendix to put in this. And what I really like about this is moving forward, and I promise we won't have another quarter decade between like the transportation plan or the 20 years that we had as a master plan. In the next 10 years when we do update, it can be just put in as a regular item within the master plan. It will be put within the scope, so it'll kind of be memorialized for here going forward.
Thanks, Brady. I appreciate the idea that we can start thinking outside of the car-centric thought process and parking and other things. So appreciate your willingness to work with all the different agencies in the city on moving forward in that direction. I'm going to turn to Councilman Pui.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I would like to make a motion. No, not yet, huh? Oh, in this formal session. I'm eager.
Any other questions or comments for Brady or Sam? All right. Thank you very much. Have a good evening.
Thank you, you too.
We're moving on to item number 7, which is the budget amendment for number 4 of fiscal year 2022 to 23. Ben's coming back up to the table, and Mary Beth, and I think did I see Mary Beth and John?
John is here. I think he'll be here.
Okay, great.
Budget sense.
All right, Ben.
Oh,
sorry, Tom. This is the first briefing for budget amendment number 4. The public hearing is scheduled for December 6th. There are 36 individual items totaling over $121 million in expenditures. Of that amount, $5.8 million is coming from fund balance. This also includes 6 new FTEs or full-time employees that are proposed. If all the items are adopted, then fund balance would be at 15.3%. This is $9.9 million above the 13% minimum target. We have the first revenue update since the annual budget. It is showing a favorable variance. It's $3.1 million above what was projected at this point in the fiscal year. There are 2 primary sources that are driving that favorable increase: sales and use tax. It's about $1.5 million above estimates. And the other big one is interest income, which is $700,000 above estimates. That one not being surprising since the Federal Reserve has increased interest rates by 4% this calendar year. So the money that's in the bank is earning more interest. Are there any questions on the revenues before we proceed? Okay. I'm going to jump to two items that are somewhat urgent since the administration has requested straw polls, and I know time is short tonight. The first one is item A13. This is a request for $155,000 from the IMS fund for new computers and related devices for the airport police. Some council members may recall that the council approved unifying the airport police with the city police department in fiscal year 2019. Since then, the airport and the police department have negotiated an MOU, a memorandum of understanding, to govern the services and the costs with that relationship. And as part of it, IMS will be taking on a bigger role in having the electronic equipment, the software, and the training that the police use. And as part of that, we need the $155,000 budget amendment before you. There are a few benefits to this. The further integration of the police at the airport into the IMS system so that all the police officers have similar skill sets and there's interoperability benefits as well. So if a police officer wanted to move from one to the other, it would be an easier transition.
You want a straw poll now?
Yes, the straw poll is requested because of the lead time in getting laptops. IMS has reported it can be close to a year in some instances. So ordering now, we hope to get them 9 to 12 months from now.
And mine.
May I ask a question?
Yes.
Mr. Chair, thank you. So why is it that it needs to come from our side of the money bucket and not the airport money bucket when the police, this is very technical terms I'm using today. I'm feeling great. Today is one of those days. So why is this not coming from the budget, from the airport budget, when the airport is paying for the police? Why is this technology having to come from our side?
So I'm going to have Mary Beth help me here, but I believe IMS as an internal service fund, the airport through the MOU will be compensating based on the agreements in the MOU for these costs, but IMS needs the authorization to spend these funds from the council.
And it will be one-to-one, the cost of the computers?
Correct.
What?
Yes,
Yes.
correct.
Thank you.
Good question.
Great question. I just want to looking for a straw poll on this one.
So let me just make sure I'm understanding. We're doing $155,000 from the IMS fund. They have a separate fund balance or whatever.
That's
and
correct.
then that will be reimbursed at in a later thing by the airport budget because it's okay. Mr. Chair, I'll propose a straw poll that we support this item A13.
I have a straw poll on the table. All in favor, give me a thumbs up. And that's 6 thumbs up with Councilmember Valamoros absent.
There is one more item that has a straw poll requested. This is item I2. It's a $38,000 grant from Rocky Mountain Power for electric vehicle or EV charging infrastructure on 200 South. The city applied for the grant on October 25th, and Rocky Mountain Power quickly awarded the funds, but gave a 30-day deadline for the city to sign the acceptance letter. So the straw poll is a request if the council supports this grant so that the acceptance letter can be signed, since this budget amendment wouldn't be approved until after that 30-day deadline. And this funding would be part of the reconstruction of 200 South, which is a major corridor redevelopment that I believe begins next year.
Any questions? Or Councilmember Mono?
Okay. When we have grant applications, we normally have a public hearing at some point. Has this already had a public hearing?
It has
It's not. So this is a little bit out of order from what we would typically do. I don't imagine this would happen, but say we get a whole bunch of negative feedback from the public at the public hearing about this grant application, but we've already accepted the money. How do we, is there a way to undo it?
So
procedurally?
So my understanding is even if the acceptance letter is signed, the council still needs to approve the budget amendment. So until the budget amendment is approved, the council can still say no.
Okay, and we wouldn't be in some kind of contractual legal problem if we signed a thing with Rocky Mountain Power.
We
but-
just wouldn't accept it.
Okay, great.
And this just pays for the capital expenses? Are we on the hook for the installation or the work or anything?
I'm not sure what the plan is to pay for the electricity that would be provided for the actual charging or for the maintenance costs. I'm guessing that that would be on the city, but we can confirm.
And the actual like installing of the infrastructure, like one-time and ongoing costs associated with it, please.
So we can get that information, and the council, if there's a briefing on November 22nd, we could consider the straw poll then, so you have more information, and that would still be within the 30-day deadline.
So you're more comfortable waiting until that? Okay.
I feel like, yeah.
Sure. The questions are,
What are the one-time costs associated with actually installing the infrastructure? And what are potential ongoing costs, both through the electricity provided and the maintenance that we'll have to do to keep them working?
and does the $38,000 actually cover the entirety,
Right.
or will there be a match? I would add that, if that's okay, Mr. Chair.
Sure.
If that's it, I can start going through the regular items.
No, we're going to hold off until the 22nd.
Going to get
Yeah.
some more information.
Yeah.
So that takes us to item A1. It's a request for $38,000 from general fund balance for costs the recorder's office incurred for election awareness. This includes adding the insert into the voter information pamphlet about the GO bond. So this will backfill the recorder's office budget for expenses that they have covered.
And right now, there's no more straw polls. We're just going to go through these.
Correct.
As far as we.
Correct.
Until 6:10. Gotcha.
Next is A2. This is $490,000 from unspent Operation Rio Grande funds that are proposed to be repurposed for homeless services. This would be done through a contract with the county, and there are 4 proposed uses I'll touch on. The first is $274,000 for VOA's street outreach team that is specific to Salt Lake City. This would continue the existing operations of that 4-person team. It includes, bless you, it includes 2 case managers that focus on long-term housing and 2 coordinators that focus on shorter-term solutions, such as placement into detox or treatment facilities. Without this additional $274,000, the 4-person team would stop working because they do not have other ongoing funding sources. There is a county-wide team that VOA has that would continue to be available in the city, but it would reduce the level of service because they work throughout the county, whereas this 4-person team is just for Salt Lake City.
And I would just fund it through this fiscal year.
That's a good question. I think it would just be for one 12-month period, given the funding amount, and that it's 4 different FTEs, but let's confirm that.
Mr. Chair, I have a question. Did we not include funding for this team in our general budget? I thought that would be surprising that we had cut it, but am I?
There's a separate street outreach team that is funded through the Homeless Shelter Cities Mitigation Grant. So you might be thinking of that one.
Okay.
But when...
but this is the team that's been working for a few years.
Yeah,
this is just to continue. Okay.
Correct.
Do we have metrics for success? Because the last time I heard about a team like this, and I might be thinking of the wrong one, was something like, what was it, a dozen people had been talked to and 3 had been placed?
I think you were. I think you were remembering the same thing. We're talking about the rapid intervention team that the city has, our own internal rapid intervention team.
Is that what I'm remembering?
So, I will be interested to ask sort of the same question to the BOA.
Yeah, I want metrics for everything. Every dollar I approve, I want metrics for it.
Yeah, we'll ask. So the next of the 4 uses that are proposed is $177,000 for winter overflow operations, but the provider is to be determined. Note that the funds could be used for the police department's overtime related to the winter overflow shelter. Staff is highlighting this option since you will see 4 items in this budget amendment that are also requesting overtime for the police department that total over $4.8 million. So there's a significant need for overtime, and this would be an option if the council's interested. The other 2 uses are smaller. $30,000 for security. This would go to shelter the homeless for the King and Miller Homeless Resource Centers. The city does not typically pay for private security at HRCs or other private properties. The operator, Shelter the Homeless, has told the city there is a funding gap for security services this fiscal year. And then the last one,
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
So this is an interesting request, and I'm supportive. I just want to ask some questions about what is this security supposed to do. Are they only securing the internal facilities or the area surrounding? This is, I toured the Dallas shelter, some older shelters across the country right in the last little while, and many of them are using some of their security around. So I would like some definitions about how they're going to use this money and if they intend to also look up for their street, the issues around their shelter.
We'll definitely ask. I remember from some previous inquiries that were similar that typically the security ends where the private property ends and doesn't extend into the public right of way, but we'll ask.
Yeah, and I think that is my point, is if we are funding it, maybe I will feel very, I don't want to speak for everybody, but I will feel very encouraged to say, well, maybe it is a little beyond your property, and it is more about what is happening just immediately around you too. So, thank you.
Yeah, following up on that, if this is an enhancement to what they typically function on, or this is an extra amount of money, I'd like to know what we can expect to see in extra outcomes beyond what we're experiencing right now for that money. What's the ROI on the city giving them that money for that function?
Okay. And we might have Andrew Johnston with us virtually. I don't know if he's with us and knows.
Andrew, did you hear that question?
I did. For the resource, for the resource center security request, it's filling a gap in the current staffing levels that they're short. So this would be existing staffing levels for this private security hired at the resource centers through Shelter the Homeless, who's the overseer of that contract, I believe.
Thank you. That makes sense.
Mr. Chair, sorry, follow up. So if that's the case, I would like to see if there is more, if there is an additional amount of money that they will be interested, if they could actually help beyond their property line. That's something that I will feel very supportive of, and I just would like them to think that way as well, because obviously everybody has heard how much they impact in the community. So if we can maybe potentially help in other ways, that will be something I will be very supportive of.
We can certainly ask. I remember that insurance had some concerns about liability of extending security services beyond the private property boundary, but it's worth asking the question again. The last of the 4 items is $9,000 for the VOA detox beds. There are 2 beds that the city has access to, and the costs increased after the annual budget was adopted. So this $9,000 is to pay those higher costs for the 2 existing beds, which are available for the city to take people to. So if a police officer or a social worker is aware of someone who could use a detox bed and it's currently available, this funding ensures that it's accessible for the city.
Yeah, let's we'll hold off on there and we'll pick it up on the next one.
Okay.
Okay.
Gotcha.
Appreciate that very much, Ben. That's just going to keep us on track for I think a closed session. So next up, we have Utah Community Renewable Energy Program application update. We have Christopher Thomas and Sophia, and I think that's it. And Sam giving us the introduction. So Christopher, Sam's on the computer. Sam's on the screen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just got a quick intro. The Community Renewable Energy Agency is a joint cooperative program among Utah cities and other partners to create renewable energy resources. A primary council role with the CREA, or Utah 100, as it's also known, is the council potentially acting on an ordinance that would authorize and activate the program in Salt Lake City. That's not this. That's a ways down the road. This is a draft form of that ordinance that you all will hear about tonight. The second topic of the second major topic of the briefing is for the council to learn, recommend changes, or ask questions about the group's programmatic efforts to develop support for rate burden customers that will offset any new costs as a result of this program. Finally, the council might wish to ask the administration to come back. The administration has offered to come back after the program submission is finished, at which time more details will be public and the conversation could be helpful at that time if the council wanted to take them up on that after the submission is finalized. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Sam. And just to give you a timeline, you probably have about 10 minutes and a few minutes for questions. So thanks, Christopher.
We will go very quickly through the presentation and try to focus on the main points in your questions. So this is the presentation. If you have other questions, there's a lot in this presentation that we're going to just go through quickly. We're happy to talk more again at another time, as Sam mentioned, but I'll turn it over to Christopher and not take any more time. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, council members, council staff. It's great to be with you here tonight to talk about the Community Renewable Energy Agency. My name is Christopher Thomas with the Sustainability Department. I'm the Senior Energy and Climate Program Manager. Next slide, please. So tonight we want to just give an update to council and invite questions and feedback. We want to give an overview of the Community Renewable Energy Program, talk about our anticipated timeline, and then review 3 required program elements, 2 of which we would love feedback on now before a board vote, Community Renewable Energy Agency board vote that's anticipated to come up in December. The 3rd of which we're just giving a preview. We don't actually have a draft to provide you yet, but will as soon as that is available. Next slide, please. So here's what we're asking for feedback on. Next slide, please. So what we would like is feedback from council on a proposed energy affordability plan elements and the draft model ordinance. And the way we have kind of a unique agency structure. Basically, if you have comments that you would like to provide on the elements of the draft energy affordability plan or the model ordinance, please submit those to Chair Dugan, Sam Owen, and me, and basically those would be able to be considered by Councilmember Dugan before the vote on December 5th. Next slide, please. Okay, let's start with an overview. Next slide, please. So the goal of the program is to deploy large-scale renewable energy to clean up our electricity supply. And it needs to be paid for by those customers who participate in the program. Technically, every year, we would seek to match the amount of electricity we use with the amount of renewable energy delivered onto the grid for participating customers by 2030. That's our goal established in a joint resolution. This is also referred to as a net 100% renewable electricity goal. And this is the single largest strategy for reducing carbon pollution associated with Salt Lake City's electricity consumption. Next slide, please. So who is participating in the program? It's Salt Lake City plus 17 others across the state. You can see them there. Collectively, we constitute 25% of Rocky Mountain Power's electricity sales in the state of Utah. So we're not the majority, but we're a pretty big chunk of their customer base. Next slide, please. The way the agency board is constructed is as follows. You can see we've got a board of directors. Chair Dugan is also the chair of the board of the Community Renewable Energy Agency, and then we've got 3 committees who kind of do the work of the board and make recommendations back to the board for them to vote on to create a single unified program design to present to Utah Public Service Commission. Next slide, please. So, thankfully, our grid is supposed to be getting greener over the next several years leading up to 2030. That's represented by these blue bars. So our grid-supplied electricity from Rocky Mountain Power is already starting to get cleaner, but in 2030, there will still be a significant gap, about 42% of our energy sources supplying electricity that will not be renewable. So it'll be the goal of the agency to close that gap by bringing online new renewable energy resources, and that's how you get to the 100%. Next slide, please. In terms of how the program will work, basically we'll look to secure agreements to procure renewable energy from mostly large-scale utility renewable energy sources. Those will then plug in to the Rocky Mountain Power grid and be interconnected with it, and then that will serve our homes and businesses in Salt Lake City and any of the other 17 communities who decide to participate. Next slide, please. So let's talk for a moment about milestones and our currently anticipated timeline. Next slide, please. So you can see there's a lot on here. You can see the first 3 items all have green check marks. Hooray, we finished those, but we still have quite a bit to go. Those that don't have check marks, let me just try to summarize this slide by saying there was a state law passed in 2019 that gave us the ability to create this program, but it set forth a lot of requirements we'd have to meet to get that program in place. And so that's what all these other elements are as you go toward the right of the screen. Next slide, please. Oh, and actually, I'm sorry, the 3 yellow highlighted items are the ones I'm going to talk to you more about tonight. So the utility agreement, the low-income plans, and the draft ordinance. Okay, thanks. So currently our anticipated timeline is that Rocky Mountain Power would make a regulatory filing on our behalf to the Utah Public Service Commission sometime between December and March of 2023. We would then hopefully expect a decision by the Public Service Commission sometime between March and June. Then there's a strict timeline of 90 days after that approval where Salt Lake City Council and all the other governing bodies of the other communities would need to decide and take action on an ordinance to finalize their participation. So we're going to look at the draft of that ordinance language tonight. You're not voting on it tonight. We're just sort of trying to seek feedback on what should it say when it comes time to vote on it. And then we would expect, hopefully, that electric customers would start receiving their noticing about the program opening up maybe as soon as November of next year or January of 2024. So those are our near-term anticipated timeline steps. Next slide, please. So let's talk about energy affordability. One of the committees created by this agency is called the Low-Income Plan Committee. It's designed to help all the participating communities fulfill their statutorily requirement of having this plan for low-income assistance, or what we like to call plan for energy affordability. Next slide, please. This is just a citation to the Utah statute and the administrative rules that outlines the fact that we need this plan that they call proposed plan addressing low-income programs and assistance. Next slide, please. So one of the things that the Low-Income Plan Committee did was compile resources, started by looking at the available data so we could have a better sense of our community and, customers who fell below certain income thresholds. Next slide, please. One of these is called the Community Profile. That basically tries to aggregate data from a federal database called the LEAD tool, Low Income Energy Affordability Data. And then we also compiled from that some maps, particularly one called Energy Burden Maps. Energy burden is basically just the percentage of income that a household has to devote to their energy bills every month. Next slide, please. I don't have time to really delve into this deeply, but this is the community profile. This is available on the Utah 100 Communities website. Again, this is mostly federal data showing information about the Salt Lake City community within our boundaries. It also shows some data at the top that we specifically requested from Rocky Mountain Power, showing the number of customers who are currently receiving bill assistance, and also those that are 60 or more days behind on their energy bills. Next slide, please. These maps basically show that same information, just geographically. It shows the estimated number of households at or below certain federal poverty limits, and then the colors indicate, on average, of those households, how much are they devoting toward energy costs? How much of their income are they devoting toward energy costs? Next slide, please. So then the Low-Income Plan Committee met with a lot of, met with state regulators, with state implementers of energy efficiency programs. It came up with 4 proposed strategies. These haven't been decided upon yet, but they're under strong consideration, will probably be voted on at the December board meeting. Next slide, please. So those 4 are an automatic opt-out, number 2, and I'll talk about each one of these in turn later, a termination fee waiver, an enhanced bill credit for lower income customers who would like to participate in the program, and finally, a request for an online donation function from Rocky Mountain Power. Next slide, please. So for the automatic opt-out, the idea is that residential customers who are either enrolled in the current, what they call Schedule 3, which provides a monthly bill credit of up to $13.95. So if they're already enrolled in this program, or they're 60 or more days behind on a bill payment at the time the program launches, these few customers would not automatically be enrolled in the Community Renewable Energy Program, with the rationale being that they may be the most sensitive to any bill increase that might accompany being part of the program. But they would receive, instead of an opt-out notice, they would receive an opt-in notice, basically saying, hey, here's this program, we'd love to have you join us, here's the, assistance that's available if you'd like to, please consider that. Okay, next slide, please. The next one is a termination fee waiver. So basically, after a period of about 5 months, so after receiving 2 opt-out notices and then 3 billing cycles, where somebody might notice and say, hey, wait, I'm in this Community Renewable Energy Program, I'm not sure what this is, I might want to cancel out within the first 3 months. But if they don't do it in the first 3 months, then there may be a termination fee. So far, what our Program Design Committee has talked about in terms of a termination fee is a modest one that probably most of our households should be able to bear, so around $30, say. But with this option, this programmatic option, if a customer was already receiving bill payment assistance and they realize they're in the program but they want to terminate out, their fee would be waived. So no fee for those customers. Next slide, please. The next one is probably the most exciting one. So under this enhanced monthly bill credit option, our program would basically create an extra bill credit so that customers who are receiving bill assistance for their Rocky Mountain Power bill, and they want to participate in the Community Renewable Energy Program, could then receive an extra monthly bill credit designed to, on average, offset any extra cost of being in the program. So it's basically saying we want to provide an avenue for all customers, regardless of their income situation, that if they're already receiving bill assistance that's standard, then they can get this extra bill assistance to try to be part of the program at on average, no extra cost. Next slide, please. This last option is a request that we've made of Rocky Mountain Power for an online donation function. There is a paper mailing donation opportunity that's sent out twice per year by Rocky Mountain Power, but a lot of customers are now paying their bills online, and so they may miss that donation opportunity. And so we've asked them. They've said they don't think their billing system can currently accommodate this, but we basically said we want to work with you as soon as that functionality is available to create an online donation function that will help support that enhanced monthly bill credit that I talked about previously. So those are the 4 programmatic options. Please let Councilmember Chair Dugan or me or Sam know if you have any comments on those before December 5th. Next slide, please. So that's one part of Salt Lake City's plan for low-income assistance or energy affordability plan, but there's another section that's really important that's all devoted to outreach. How do we get the word out before the program starts in a way that's designed to try to reach customers who may be most affected by any change to their electricity bill? Next slide, please. So in talking about this as a low-income plan committee, we realized there were certain segments of our community that we wanted to make sure to do enhanced communication for. And we settled on these groups. So those receiving housing assistance, those receiving a fixed income, those who are renters and may not directly be the one who's able to make the decision about whether to participate in the program or not. If they live in a single-family detached home, those tend to have higher energy costs on average, or are recently resettled refugees. And so our outreach plan, and this is what we've suggested to all the communities, all 18, is that they coordinate communication through organizations that serve these populations. So we're suggesting a one-on-one meeting sometime during next year, that we add them to a listserv, invite them to quarterly meetings, just so we can keep a good line of communication, understand how our program might be affecting lower income customers that they serve, or if they have ideas, for federal funds or things that we should go after, that we have that open line of communication. We plan to provide posters in English, Spanish, or another language with a request to display in their high visibility areas, and then providing them informational emails in case they've got a listserv that they can send those to.
Mr. Chair, so a quick question. Explain to me how the renters how does this affect renters? I mean, renters that they don't pay their utility bills. There's a lot of them, right? Like there's a lot of people in our community that just pay a flat fee to their landlord, and the bill is under the landlord's name or the LLC or whatever it is. So why would we be reaching out to the renters instead of to the landlord or the LLC or the corporation? Because they have no say. I mean, the renter has no say on this. So why would be doing that instead of reaching out to the parent or whomever is actually owning the bill?
I think that's a great insight, and I think it's something we should add to our outreach strategy, for sure. That's great, thank you. Okay, next slide, please. So we used a statewide database called the 211 database. It's maintained by United Way, just to do a search and try to identify organizations who serve these populations. And we did this statewide, not just for Salt Lake City, but all the 18 communities. So we've got here displayed a list of those organizations we identified through that means, but we're certainly open to hearing other suggestions for organizations that council members think we ought to be coordinating with in this outreach strategy. Next slide, please. So again, we just request that if you've got comments on either the outreach strategy or organizations or the 4 programmatic approaches to assistance, that you please let us know before December 5th. Next slide, please. Let's talk quickly about the draft model ordinance. Oh, do we need to cut it off?
Yeah, just quickly go through this, yeah.
Okay, next slide, please. So this is a very unique ordinance. The only reason really that this ordinance is required is because state law says it's required, and its function in life is basically to just say, here's a community, they indicated by resolution they would like to achieve this goal. At the end of the process, once we have a program, the way the community says, yep, we're in, is by adopting this ordinance. Right now, we're just seeking feedback on what should that ordinance say, because we've got to submit the draft of that to the Public Service Commission for their approval, and then whatever ordinance we end up considering has got to be substantially similar to what we told the Public Service Commission that we would consider.
And may I just clarify, this is the place where the council can take action and weigh in. The other communities took their original agreement to their city council elected officials to sign off on that. That wasn't done here in Salt Lake City, so this is your opportunity.
And we probably won't have the time to go through all this, but as far as making edits to it, but we definitely need to make the edits to it because we submit one draft ordinance to the PSC as a collective body of all 18 municipalities.
Oh, yeah, next slide, please. Yep, so basically we're just, we've provided via transmittal a draft of that language. Other communities have also been looking at it. We've been looking at it with Sarah Montoya from the City Attorney's Office. So we already have come up with some clarifying language edits that we'd like to recommend back. But if you've got others, please let us know.
And just highlight the couple of the big key items on the draft ordinance as far as what's in the ordinance.
It basically, yeah, great point. Sorry, I skipped over that, Mr. Chair. So it's basically finalizing Salt Lake City's participation in the program. Then it contains a lot of informational material. So if you are a resident, you're looking up this ordinance and you're saying, what is this community renewable energy program? It will tell you the basic outline of how you as a resident should expect to interact with that program. But it also makes clear that a lot of those things are actually decided on by the Public Service Commission. They're the state body that regulates over all rates and things like that. So it basically says, here's what you should expect. However, it's really the Public Service Commission that makes the final decision on rates and certain other items.
Go ahead.
No, I appreciate the presentation about thinking about those on fixed income or, struggling to keep up with their bill and whatnot. Extra information for them, that's fantastic. I also think that maybe information to those that, like myself, that have solar panels, information to me. I don't know how this will work with me because I only basically, for the most of the year, I pay a connection fee. Not now, but for most of the year, I pay for only a connection fee. So I would like information on how that will work for me. That makes sense?
Yep.
Absolutely.
I do want to point out that it's interesting after we've gone through this, the number of residents who are in the energy credit side is only 3% of the residency. So very few people actually participate in the energy bill program. We would think that there'd be higher, but it's very small, and that's pretty much evenly across all 18 municipalities. It's very low percentage actually participate in the energy credit, which was shocking to all of us. So, thank you, Christopher, for that. Any questions for Christopher? And of course, as anything else like this stuff is sometimes hard to digest. But if you got questions, come see me, and I'll also provide some input.
And we're always happy to have small meetings or take questions on via email, of course. So yeah, thanks for your time. We really appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. Okay, Council, we are moving on to board appointments for the Business Advisory Board. We have Silvanusi New coming up. Mr. New, how are you today, sir?
How are you guys doing?
Good. Thanks for wanting to join the BAB, the Business Advisory Board. Appreciate it. It's a great opportunity. I'm wonderful that you want to join it. So tell us why you want to join the BAB.
Well, first of all, I want to thank you all. I know you guys are tired and update your Facebook, but I'm glad to be here tonight. But like I said, I'm from Glendale. You've probably seen me a couple times. And let me tell you a little bit about myself. I moved up from Hawaii, me and my wife, and we settled in Glendale. We've been there 25 years. And I'm a small business electrical contractor. But how I all started off, I started off in high school. I accidentally ran into this room, which is the electrical room on the trade service, and I happened to fall in love with it. This is 1984. And I stuck with it all the way up to today. On this field, there isn't hardly any Polynesian on this field. I have to say, I worked my way through, and I got my master 2 years ago. There isn't anybody on the Polynesian has a master in electrical. I'm proud, but also it has been a long journey. I have traveled the world on my trade, and I've seen places, I've been all around the United States on my trade. But I also started 2 years ago an electrical company called Concord Electric. And Concord Street is the name of the street I lived in, and I named it Concord Street. And, and since I stayed in this street, I went through my whole education living in Glendale. And I seen, we all sleep in the basement. You know why? Because there's shootings every day. And I still live in the basement. Now now Glendale Street, Concord, has changed. A lot of new people moving in, but I still remain in this basement. And at the same time, I see the kids in my street grow up. The ward I grow up, I see them grow with me. And I become an idol in this neighborhood for my business, the way I live my standard, the way I dream. And now that I have a business, I'm an idol for all these kids because some of them, they work for me. And I also have these kids go through trade school in the electrical field. So I figured if I've seen this for 25 years, why not be an inspiration of a company growing out of Glendale for myself and for the dream kids in them. I want to be involved with, I always dreamed of owning a business. Now that I have this opportunity for invited to be in, love to see, I learned so much in business, a network, all these things to another level, deal with the federal government, with the state. A lot of these kids, a lot of these minority companies do not deal with the federal. I'm dealing with the federal because I have guts to deal with them. I deal with I'm doing an airport contract right now, Gate 39. I'm learning, making mistakes, but I'm learning. But it's a field that to inspire the next generation of Glendale people. There's hardly any business. Right across from 17 South, I see a lot of business moving out. They're not moving in. And guess what? Homeless people moving in. But I wanted to inspire, I would love to grow my business in Glendale. Get the kids involved with anything that needs to grow business. I'm talking other business, inspire them to grow in Glendale. I did a job in Oakland, California. And the police were going to say, hey, wear a vest because you're working and, you're a little bit white. So I worked in that area, and I get to find out how it actually works. Had this company fix this whole street and move companies back to Oakland. And I worked there for 2 years. I moved back to Utah, and I figured out how to grow business. But overall, this opportunity, if I were to be in this board, I have so many ideas. I have so many goals that I could do whatever I think to grow from a little shop that sees some Mexican guys selling food right out of the street. I have all these ideas when I go, hey, Have you ever thought of going selling your business out to the airport? Because when the guys get out of the food, they want to eat, they buy. And I see big companies serving that, but I tell this guy, go to the city, try to get you a permit so he could go sell that food in the airport. So I have all these ideas to grow just people in Glendale. But overall, you know, this is not just for my business. I love to be inspired, and that's who I am. And I've been at it forever. Until the day I'm buried, then I'll stop. And that's the reason why I want to be on this committee.
Thank you very much. That's wonderful. Councilmember Fowler.
Thank you. Mr. New, I don't have any questions for you. I just wanted to say that from the very first time that you came to a council meeting, I can remember the passion and the dedication that you have consistently shown for Glendale and for your business and for your community. I remember it brought me to tears the first time that you came to our council meeting to address us. And I want to thank you for your continued dedication to your community and to this city. And I think that you are a much needed voice on this particular board. And I want to thank you for continuing to serve, like I said, for your community and for us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Puy.
Yes, very quickly. It's an honor that a company from Glendale is also building our airport. So I think you should, and I know you're proud of this, and I think you should be extra proud, and people from Glendale should know more about this. And the sky is the limit, and I think that's what you're trying to inspire others to say you can actually be part of this community beyond Glendale. We can actually export our amazing talent to other parts of the city and beyond. So thank you for being that voice. I'm very excited for you to join.
Thank you.
And thank you very much. I appreciate that. And this is a great opportunity, and I think the board will benefit immensely from your participation on the board. You'll be on tonight's consent agenda. You need not hang out for that, but you're more than welcome to join us. But you'll be on tonight's consent agenda for the vote. So thank you very much, Mr. New. Appreciate it.
Thank you, all of you guys.
All right, wonderful.
Okay.
Council, we're moving on to item number 10, report of the chair and the vice chair. I have nothing to report this time, Mr. Bono.
Nope.
And report announcements of the executive director. And council, we will be going into members here in person, we will be going into a closed session at this time. That means we will be clearing out the room, and we'll just be the staff here going into closed session. And we do closed sessions for a number of reasons. For tonight's reasons, we're going to be going in closed session for attorney-client matters.
And property.
And property purchase. So we exclude the public so we can discuss these items in a closed session environment. You're more than welcome to sit out in the hallway or across the street. Across the hallway. Across the hall. Look both ways before you cross the hallway. And we'll also be, we'll be coming back here hopefully at 7 o'clock, unless this closed session lasts longer, but our goal is to be done, eat and have a closed session at the same time in the next 30 minutes.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
You need a motion?
Please do.
Mr. Chair, I move that we go into closed session for purposes to discuss the purchase, exchange, or lease of real property and attorney-client matters.
Second.
I have a motion from Councilmember Fowler, second from Councilmember Puy. All in favor of that motion?
Roll call it.
It is required a roll call. Councilmember Petro?
Yes.
Mono?
Yes.
Wharton?
Yes.
Holly?
Yes.
Fowler?
Yes.
Dugan is a yes. Also, that passes 6-0 with Valdemoros absent. Thank you.